Welcome everyone to the June 17th Oklahoma City Board of Adjustment meeting. Ask that anybody that has a cell phone they haven't silenced yet, please do that so we're not interrupted today. We're missing one board member today. Mr. Dunn is not with us today. First item is the approval of the minutes of the prior meeting.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Please record your vote. They're approved.
There's a whole bunch of green lights that came on.
Huh? I did. Oh, yeah, I did. I already flipped it. Yeah, quick. Next item is request for continuances, withdrawals.
We have none today.
Okay. Are there any requests from the audience for continuances or withdrawals today? None? Okay. Next item is public hearings. There's no consent docket today, so it's items requiring separate vote.
Our first item is item number 1, case number 13268, application for special exception of TNT Operating, Inc. to allow a disposal well located at 4231 Southeastern Avenue.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Wayne Smith on behalf of the applicant TNT Operating. Be happy to answer any questions you might have on this disposal special exception.
Any questions? Do you agree to abide by all the staff recommendations and
yes, we
requirements?
Do. Yes, we do.
Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second. Motion and second to approve the application. All in favor, or please record your votes. You're approved.
Thank you.
Next item is item number 2, case number 13270, application for special exception of Arrowhead Energy, Inc. to allow a saltwater disposal well located at 18910 Lily Drive.
Mr. Chairman, I'm also here on behalf of Arrowhead Energy. Was made aware this morning at a late hour of one protest. If there are any more than that, I don't know. Be happy to answer questions not only from you members of the board but from the public as well. This particular well is a recently drilled within the last year. It is constructed according to the most current technical standards, and this is a non-commercial well as its proposed use, which means that any material that's brought to the well is piped in from an adjacent well.
How deep is the well?
It's over 6,000 feet.
Is up on Lily Drive, is that a residential house to the north of your site there?
There are a few residences out there in 600 feet at the minimum.
600 feet within their water well or within the structure, or do you know?
The structure. The structure.
So I don't know where their wells are.
I don't know the exact location of their water wells. The protest letter that was provided to me late this morning indicated that quite some time ago there was some discussion about disposal wells in this area. And in the time that I had to do some research, there are 15 wells that have been drilled in this section of land since records have been kept. And all but 2 of those wells were drilled from 1980 to present, meaning that they are designed and constructed according to modern standards. There are 2 wells that were drilled in the 1950s. Those 2 wells do have a shorter surface casing which is your primary groundwater protection device, but they are located in excess of a half mile away from this site.
There's also a letter from the Land Office stating concerns about contamination of groundwaters.
That's it. I read that letter. It does seem to be a standard or very common request and concern about groundwater. The key to understanding the protection of groundwater is the chronology of when wells were drilled and the technical standards at which they were constructed. The Corporation Commission maintains a set of rules that require the drilling company to set a water protection string sufficiently deep to prevent the contamination of the treatable water zones. The City of Oklahoma City has ordinance requirements in place that also maintain that protection of the groundwater through casing, cementing, testing, and what we call cement bond logging, which is an acoustical device that measures the quality of the cement sheath between the formation rock and the steel casing. All of these current wells from at least 1984 to present have been required to meet those standards.
How is it verified, and who pays for that?
The City of Oklahoma City has inspectors that are on site during the construction of the well to verify and to witness the testing of these systems.
The one protester has asked that Arrow be accountable for testing monthly and that the test results be made available to the public.
That's not uncommon. Don't have any problem with that testing. However, monthly is kind of on the ridiculous side as far as frequency. Wouldn't have any problem with providing annual third-party laboratory testing and results. That's not a problem.
If it is approved and if the tests, confirm that the groundwater's been contaminated, then what?
Then it's up to Arrowhead Energy to provide water to that person. In all reality, the likelihood of that happening is infinitesimally small.
I wasn't thinking of this protester, this homeowner particularly, but the groundwater's in that area.
There are a multitude of technical restraints that are placed on disposal wells. The primary thing for disposal wells is such that if your surface pressure that you're using to inject the water back in the ground, which every producing well, irregardless of where it is, produces water along with hydrocarbons. And the best approach and the best solution to handling that waste product is to return it where it came from, and that's back in the ground at depth. This water will be injected more than a mile below the surface. There will be an excess of 4,000 feet, almost 5,000 feet, between any of the producible freshwater zones and the zone of injection. And when you take the physical properties of water and gravity, you can calculate the amount of pressure that it takes to cause that salt water to come from where it's being injected back to the surface. And it is a physical constraint. The Corporation Commission, which also oversees disposal wells very intently through their UIC department, in order to get a permit to dispose from the state, you're required to show proof of radius of endangerment. Well, radius of endangerment is a calculation that takes into effect the distance between your freshwater zone and your saltwater injection zone and the amount of pressure that you're introducing at the surface to show that you're not going to endanger those shallow sands where your fresh water resides.
Any other questions?
I've got a question of the staff. JJ, do you know how many of these type wells are in this particular area? Do you happen to know?
I don't know of any in the immediate area, within 1 to 2 miles.
Does this company have a disposable well anyplace else in Oklahoma, or in Oklahoma City
No.
metropolitan area?
No. Their closest disposal well is in Noble County.
So this letter from the from the land office does concern me, just because I've been on the board 2 years now, and we've approved some of these, and I've not seen this letter before. So,
Well, then, this letter from the land office probably stems from a study that was done in the 1950s of the Garber-Wellington area, aquifer recharge area, which this part of southeastern Oklahoma City is considered part of that. And as such, there are additional insurance requirements on every oil and gas operator, and there's some other operational constraints. And the main one that falls from that is the Corporation Commission issued a field order for that area that stipulates that you have to have a minimum of 1,200 feet of surface casing to protect the surface groundwater. Now, the 2 wells that were drilled in this section of land in 1950 were drilled prior to that field order being established. But subsequent to that, and the records that I found, there's a 35-year gap before there was any additional drilling. All of those wells have the deeper surface casing, which is the first line of defense to protect groundwater.
Getting more questions these days?
And again, in this case, the staff has put requirements on this order, which we'd be happy to comply with.
I don't have a comfort level making a motion to approve this just really based on this letter alone. That's not something I've seen expressed before from the land office, and they express concern, and that concerns me.
Especially with the Garber-Wellington being, this is right in the big middle of the Garber-Wellington. And I think I would like to see, and I don't know exactly what I want to see, but I'd like to have confirmation of some kind that would never, and that's a big word, compromise the Garber-Wellington.
There have been, and I can't give you exact number, but hundreds of oil and gas wells drilled, and the primary problem with any contamination of a subsurface strata is an access point. And there have been literally hundreds of wells drilled through the Garber-Wellington over the years, and there has yet to be a contamination situation. I know in the letter that was sent out this morning there was a reference to water issues in the town of Maud, Oklahoma. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with Maud, but Maud is a small burb to the south of Seminole. Seminole is an old oil field. It was originally discovered in the early 20th century. It was drilled, there was water injected, lots of things went on before the modern environmental controls were in place. And so, yes, you do have areas where you do have surface water contamination, but it can be traced almost always to operational practices that were in effect prior to the 1950s. And the reason I say 1950s, the Corporation Commission in that decade began to enforce environmental controls on the oil and gas industry. So I understand your concern, but any well, whether it's a producer or an injector, even a Garber-Wellington water well could be a source of contamination to that aquifer. So in this situation, it is better to put this salt water back deep in the ground below the fresh water. One of the things that people sometimes don't know about fresh water is that it only exists to somewhere between 600 to 1,500 feet from surface in the state of Oklahoma. Once you go below 1,500 feet, and that's not a given number, it varies due to individual locale, all water below that depth is salty. Some of it is extremely saline. And so the best approach from an environmental standpoint, from a safety or protection standpoint of your freshwater aquifers, is to pipe that salt water that's brought to the surface in a producer back to depth below where it is isolated from the freshwater zones. Now, what I was going to show you with this graphic is a typical well. If you've never seen how they're designed, this portion is in the surface casing, and from this portion up is where your freshwater zones exist. The first step is to drill to this depth, install a steel casing, then a cement that's impermeable, does not allow fluid or gases to flow through it, is pumped through the steel and around and back to surface. It's this portion that the Oklahoma City oil and gas inspectors are on site, watch the operation, and are witness to that operation. Once that has been placed and tested, then the go-ahead is given to continue drilling to total depth. The second line of defense in any oil and gas well is the steel casing that runs all the way to the bottom of the well. Then the cementing process is repeated. It may not have cement all the way back to the surface, but the producing zones are then isolated using the cement. And then there is communication between the rock and the steel casing is established in order to produce. An injection well is just the opposite. Instead of producing to the surface, we're pushing it back to depth. And that's the only difference in them.
I guess probably 2 or 3 months ago, this would not have been a concern, okay?
Well,
The events that's happened in the Gulf, that was never supposed to happen, and when you consider that just about everything east of Douglas Boulevard in eastern part of Oklahoma City is on a private well, and if there is a chance of contaminating the Garber Wellington,
well, I would, and from a professional standpoint, as an engineer who's been in this oil and gas business since I was able to walk, there are places where contamination occurs. And as I stated, those places are areas where the protection systems were inadequate because of lack of knowledge at that time. To compare what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico with what goes on in the state of Oklahoma is an apples and orange comparison. Yes, some of the techniques are the same. The complexity, the pressures, the dangers and risks involved are magnitudes larger in the Gulf of Mexico than they are in the state of Oklahoma.
Is this your only option on drilling? As far as choosing a site like this?
Well, the only option to this is to haul that salt water in a wheeled vehicle, carrying 8,000 gallons at a time to some licensed disposal well. Now, the risk to the Garber Wellington, if a spill occurs on the surface, is much more greater than if we pipe it, contain it, and push it back where it came from. But the only option we've got, other than this disposal well for disposing of this salt water that's produced in an offset well, is to truck it.
have you considered locations that are not in a major aquifer?
Well, in order to do that, we would have to move some 20 miles. And again, that makes it impossible, impractical to do pipeline transfers. The only way we could move that fluid would be in transport truck.
Do you currently do that with other wells, all in a transportation truck?
The saltwater transportation is a common situation. It's very expensive, obviously, because you're paying trucking rates that are, and you're taking the risk of having that truck on the highway. It's not an uncommon practice, no. It's for this company and for this set of wells in this circumstance, the best option, not only from an environmental safety, but as an economic standpoint, is to put that produced water through pipeline back in the ground.
Are we comfortable yet, or do we need additional information or additional, do we need additional testimony from another party?
I think I do, and I think, you know, I'm not even sure that I would be willing to vote for this, even if we have additional information because of that aquifer. You know, and maybe I'm a little bit selfish because I live out there and I do have a private well. And I'm not interested in having that thing contaminated. And like I said, you know, there's many wells, private wells out there that, you know, that's off of that aquifer. And I just don't think this is the right location to put a disposal well right in the big middle of a major aquifer like that.
I'm uncomfortable voting on this at the moment. Would you consider continuing?
I would prefer
Another
not
meeting,
to,
or-
because we are at a point where, in order to comply with state laws, we have to do a certain amount of conversion, introduction of PACR, which is a seal, and testing to comply with the UIC requirements of the state of Oklahoma. And every day that this is postponed is one more day that we've got trucks on the highway hauling salt water to another facility. So it does present some problems and some risks. Prefer not to continue, but if that's necessary, we can do that.
But on the other hand, pumping that from the location to the well, there's a possibility of that line breaking and having a spill that way also. Is that correct?
Well, these wells are very close together. But yeah, I mean, that's a risk you have. But at the same time, it's a more contained risk than having a transport on the road.
So are you wanting a motion, one way or the other?
If you feel like that you need additional information, you know, from my standpoint, I recommend approval, but I don't have any say in that. So if you feel like you need additional information, additional time, we can continue to the next meeting. And
Well, it's possible there might be five members here next time. And also the question of whether or not there is something else that could be produced, maybe even, you know, some additional information from the land office or something like that says we are now comfortable with that or whatever. I'm just saying. Those kind of things might mitigate the concern at the moment, you know, and
okay, well,
it might alleviate our process more than extend it.
all right.
I would like to have some kind of a report or somebody here personally that knows the Garber Wellington. And I know there's a gentleman that's basically all he does is all he's, and I'm not sure of what his name is, and I think he's from the DEQ, that knows that aquifer. And, well, not only that aquifer, I would be concerned with any aquifer, freshwater aquifer that furnishes private well water. And I would like to hear from somebody like that or have something in writing from somebody like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Next meeting?
next meeting.
Okay.
Motion to continue to the next meeting, which is July 1st.
Second.
Motion and second to continue this item to the next meeting. Please record your vote. It's approved.
Thank you.
Next item?
Next item is case number 13272, request of Brookshire Homes for a variance to permit a single-family residence encroaching the platted 20-foot front building setback located at 12,008 Southwest 14th Court.
I'm brand new, so what do I do?
Excuse me, sir, yes, ma'am. Do you have a question?
Yes, sir. On the last case, sir, I know, sir, that you can take a comment from the public concerning the last case. When you continue,
Well, you weren't signed up here to speak. I'm sorry, we didn't know that you weren't signed up. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. We've continued that to the next meeting, July 1st. July 1st, is that right? Yes. So, if you would sign up to speak at the next meeting, we'd be happy to hear anything that you. Yep. There'll be forms outside here to sign up. Sorry. Go ahead.
All right. I'm brand new at this. This is my first time to ever step out of a variance, so I'm at your beck and call. What do I need to do here?
That's okay. Got a minor encroachment.
Yeah, minor encroachment. I'd recommend to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the application. Please record your vote. You're very convincing. Thank you.
Show me, B. Thank you.
Item number 4, case number 13271, request of Michael Pate for a variance to the maximum 8-foot fence height requirement located at 5801 Southwest 11th Street.
Greetings. My name is Greg Vanderwill. I'm filling in for Michael Pate. I'm the Vice President of Sales at Century Security. And our request is for our customer to build a 10-foot high security fence. The variance is requested as 2 feet. I believe it's 8. I have information. This is not our first time before the council. I have information here on our security system, if you have any questions.
Can you address the unfavorable consideration on the staff report? Do you have a copy of the staff report?
I do. What would you like me to address?
Just addressed on the back page there, under unfavorable considerations, there was just a recommendation on there. Do you see that?
Yes. We will meet those.
You'll meet those. Okay. Are there any questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
Do we have a motion and a second to approve the application? Please record your vote. You're approved.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Item number 5, case number 13269, request of Pam Barton Stober and Doug Stober for a variance to permit an accessory building exceeding the maximum size limit and encroaching the 25-foot side yard setback located at 11113 Burning Oaks Road.
Hello. I think you all received the letter that
Can you tell us who you are and where you live?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Pam Barton Stober, and I reside at 11113 Burning Oaks.
Thank you.
What letter were you just referring to?
The one that was in the application. You all have it showed in the packet.
Oh, okay. Address standards, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Mr. Chairman, I see no unfavorable conditions and no protest. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the application. Please record your vote. You're approved.
Thank you.
Bye.
Item number 6, case number 13273, request of Cynthia Aiken for a variance to the 25-foot side yard setback and the minimum 150-foot lot width requirement located at 4633 East Wilshire Boulevard.
Hi,
Your name and address, please.
my name's Cynthia Aiken, and I own the property at 4633 East Wilshire Boulevard.
Okay. Anything you'd like to say about that?
That there's a house that's been existing there since the early 60s. However, the structure isn't sound, and the foundation is crumbled, and water came in through the floor, and then other parts of the foundation cracked in two, and the roof is sagging, so I was made an application to build a new house there.
Okay. Some very odd configurations out here. Well, we don't have any protest, no unfavorable considerations, and this is an area filled with this type of these types of lots. So.
It sounds as though that what they're intending to do is clean up the area and improve the property, so I would move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the application. Please record your vote. You're approved. Good luck to you.
Item number 7, case number 13263, request of MHC Kenworth Trucking for a variance to the maximum sign height located at 7212 West I-40.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dennis Fox and Tim Johnson, here on behalf of the applicant. Jack Constant is here on behalf of Kenworth to address what we're requesting. This site, as your staff report reflects, we are asking for a sign which is substantially less than the code would allow, and in consideration of that, we would like to be able to put our sign 10 feet above what the code would allow, 60 instead of 50. Tim Johnson went out and did a survey, and he's going to talk in just a minute about all the other signs that are not only the same height we're talking about, but some taller. The reason for it, we've got a bridge that is existing at Rockwell, and so by raising our height an additional 10 feet, the truckers will have some additional time to get off the interstate. And if you're going back from the west to the east, even though we don't have any grade issues, we've got 2 billboards that are, one of them's a little over 50 feet, one of them's a little less than 50 feet, and so we'd like to have a sign that would allow the truckers sufficient time to see before they went on the underpass on the bridge. With regard to this, as your staff report reflects, we could place a sign that was 700 square feet. What we would agree to is to put a sign that's 400 square feet, and the existing facility, this is a new facility that Kenworth's building. Their existing facility is at MacArthur, and it is approximately 57 feet tall. So we're going to take the same poles that exist at the old site, move them over to this site, and we're here to answer whatever questions you might have. I would like for you to hear from Jack just for a minute so you can understand what we're doing, and then Tim can discuss the survey that he did. I remember it was in the early 80s when I got out of the city attorney's office, and I asked for a sign of similar size, and at that time the position of the staff was, well, there's no signs that exceed the height of what's allowed by the code. We went out and did a similar survey, and what we found was most of the signs were built at a height that wasn't in conformance with the height of what the code would allow at that time. So that's what we're asking for. We think the trade-off is a positive thing. It's good. A smaller size sign, we think, will make a better statement for Oklahoma City, and 10 feet won't make much of a difference in regard to impact based on other signs that exist in the area.
Dennis?
Yes.
How many signs exist now over 50 foot?
I'm going to let Tim address that because he's done the survey.
Okay.
Okay. Jack?
Good afternoon. My name is Jack Constant. I'm the branch manager with MHC Kenworth. Our work address is 5701 Southwest 5th Street. MHC stands for Murphy Hoffman Company. They are the two owners of the families that own our company. And we are a privately held dealer for the Kenworth truck. Kenworth truck's a large 18-wheeler running up and down the highway. We operate in 11 states. We have 40 locations today. We have been in Oklahoma City since 1990. We have two other locations in Oklahoma, one in Tulsa and one in Ardmore. We have been in our current facility since 1990. It is on 5th Street, just east of MacArthur, and we've outgrown that facility a long time ago. We've been very diligent in looking at the reasons for a new facility and looking for the right location for one. We chose a location off of MacArthur on I-40 because of the access for our customers to come see us. In our business, we have the majority of our service customers are not local Oklahoma City residents. They may be residents from out of town that don't typically know where we're located. So the thing they're looking for is that sign. And that sign says, here they are, and they need to look for the nearest exit. And again, they're driving 80,000-pound 18-wheeler trucks that take a significantly more time to stop and to turn, et cetera. So our goal is certainly that we provide a safe, convenient location for our customers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
How many cities are you located in?
We are actually we're in 11 states.
Okay.
We have 40 locations. So
Okay.
there's a couple of cities where we'll have multiple locations, but in Oklahoma, we're just in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
How many of those locations have 60-foot signs?
Sir, I'm not aware of that they do. I'm not aware of how many there are.
Do you know of any that has 60-foot signs?
The present sign is 57 feet at MacArthur.
Okay. But none of the other locations in other states have signs that are that tall that you know of?
There could be, but not to my knowledge.
Okay.
In the examples that you provided us, Peterbilt has a 60-foot sign.
Yes, sir. And they are a direct competitor of ours.
I understand.
That wouldn't influence your...
That's a very good point. The influence of this case dealt with the topography, the bridge, and the billboards. And it's a difficult site in the sense that if you have had the opportunity to get off on Rockwell and drive south, one, you don't drive very far until the road's closed. Number two, you look at a motel that is scary at best and a trailer park that is on the prime block. So with that, we picked a site that we thought we could have good access, but then we ran into some issues when we looked at the traveling trucking public.
Is it only westbound traffic that you're concerned with, not eastbound traffic?
Actually, both. If you look at eastbound traffic, there's no problem from a topography standpoint, but there's two billboards that are to the west of our site. One of them's a little over 50, and one of them's less than 50. And so we're trying to get above that to where you can see our signs. And the billboards, of course, are 672 square feet apiece.
Good afternoon. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates. Sorry, this map's a little hard to read. I wanted to stretch out the length that we looked at this. It's about 1.5 miles on each side of our site. So from Rockwell, we went 1.5 miles west and east. And you can see all these black dots on this map. Those are all the billboards and monument signs that exist. The 10 that I show are all signs that are above 50 feet in height. This is the current Kenworth sign that's 57 feet in height. And as you mentioned, he's right off of MacArthur. The comparison sign that we did, Mr. Baker mentioned our competitor, it's the Peterbilt sign that has the truck on the sign, for the sign. and it's approximately 370 square feet if you add all that stuff up, and it's 60 feet to the top of the sign. And we did physically measure these in the field. So what I've imposed next to that is a comparison of the Kenworth sign that is being proposed. And this picture is not the existing sign. This is at another site. But our existing sign is 57 feet, and we're talking about raising it 3 feet to meet that 60-foot height. What Mr. Box had mentioned was the condition that exists at Rockwell. And what we looked at was if you're westbound on I-40, at the half-mile mark, you're about 1,400 feet before you reach the exit point at Rockwell, and felt like that was the minimum time that you needed to make an action on the highway. And so with the sign, if the sign was put in according to code, it would be 50 feet high. With the sign at 60 feet, you would, at that point on the highway, you would physically be able to see 19.6 feet above the bridge at Rockwell. If there happens to be a truck on top of that bridge at the time, our 50-foot sign couldn't be seen. But at 60 feet, you'd be able to see the top few feet of our sign, approximately 8 feet of our sign, which is almost the height of our Kenworth sign. And then as Mr. Box mentioned, the eastbound traffic, this hatched area is our site. We're proposing to put our sign at the northwest corner of our site. There's a billboard immediately adjacent to us. It's 40 feet high, and then at the half-mile mark, it's 52 feet high at that point. So if we were at 50 feet, it would be blocked by that almost 700 square foot sign. So that's why we're asking for the 60 feet. We are willing to reduce our square footage by almost half to achieve that goal. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
How many signs did you survey?
About 70 total, and the 10 that I show immediately adjacent to us are over 50 feet. The rest of them are just under 50 feet, or there are several monument signs that are 40 feet high. Most of the billboards are right at 50 feet.
I got a question of the staff. If 50 foot is the maximum height, how did we get a 60 foot, and how did we get 55 foot, and so on and so forth? Do they not comply to the ordinance?
We looked at of the 10 that he surveyed and provided here, there were 4 that were significantly over 50 feet, anywhere from 54 to 60 feet. 3 of those signs had permits for 50 feet, and the 4th we found no permit for. So they just built them taller than they were supposed to be.
And that's what I found when I had a similar case in the early 80s. I mean, there's just a number of them, and at that time I don't think the technology was advanced like it is today, where the inspectors can go out and check and make sure the right size sign was put in. So we had 2 options. We could have looked at going through the zoning process. We thought this was a site that justified a Board of Adjustment variance based on the fact that we were going to significantly reduce the size of the sign, and would be comfortable with that being put on as a condition. And we're here to answer any questions if you have any.
I'm all in favor of smaller signs, so I think that's a plus.
Well, we've fought this battle and fought the battle and fought the battle on the Planning Commission. And I'm just not willing to go 60 foot. I'm just not willing to do that. Now, and I'm not willing to compromise. I'm not willing to compromise our ordinance. I think if we get a 60-foot sign, the next thing we're going to know, somebody's going to come in and want a 70-foot sign. And I'm not against signs, but I am against tall signs. And, especially along an appearance corridor, which I-40 is. And, I just think that is the battle that we fought in the Planning Commission, and I'm just not ready to exceed that 50 foot.
The only thing I could say to that is, you know, when the battle was fought and the Planning Commission was looking at signs, height was one issue, but size was a huge issue. And by reducing by 300 square feet the size of the sign, it's going to be a sign that I think scale-wise works out a lot better with this site than if we did a 700 square foot sign. The problem with 700 square foot sign that you took down to 50, we'd have a bridge that had significant impact in regard to people that were coming back to the west, and then we got the billboard conflict if you're going to the east. So, I mean, that's why we're here. Every case is unique. I don't think just because we think this meets the set of conditions means that you would have to approve another site. I think we've got a set of unique facts, if you've had the opportunity to drive out there, that justify it. So, but that's my opinion. And
one other thing, and this is to the staff also, what kind of ability do we have to have that 60-foot sign reduced to comply?
Well, we can certainly send an inspector out and issue them a notice to comply, and they'll either have to comply or come in and ask for a variance on the height.
you know, our goal is to take these poles that we have at the existing facility, and if we take those, I mean, if you lowered it, if 60 is what you're hung up on, if we lowered it to 57, which was what we have now, and we took the existing poles, Ms. Johnson says that still can work in regard to the traffic, but...
So you're not in compliance with the ordinance now?
I wasn't involved in the signage that was put up, but it's a 57-foot tall sign right now.
So it's out of compliance?
Non-conforming, out of compliance, I couldn't tell you. But I can tell you this, Mr. Allen, if you go from, if you go 3 miles west and 3 miles east, you'll find 15 to 20 signs that probably might not meet every provision of the ordinance, and then you're going to be in a position of going, well, okay, what was the ordinance in place at the time, and do we have permits? As Mr. Chambliss indicated, some of them don't have permits, and some of them might have been built.
So we just need to do away with the ordinance?
No, I think we need to require people to do the right thing, and that is come before you and ask for what we're asking for, and that is visually we'll show you what we're going to do. We'll have reasons why we need it at the height we do, and you either agree it's right or wrong.
Well, I'm going to ask that I don't know exactly how we do that, but I think we need to get signs within compliance or have them, you know, have them come in before this board and get them, you know, where they're in compliance. And I'm going to make a motion that we deny this request.
I mean, hopefully there's not 3 other people that agree with you, but if there are at least one more person, then it'll be automatically continued. And if that's the case, then I'd like to at least give my client the option, because then you'll be seeing this at the Planning Commission. Because, I mean, that's it.
You want it continued then?
Well, I haven't heard from the other 3 members, so.
I'm not inclined to approve it. It's a 60-foot sign. You have one sign that's 60, everything else is 55 and under. You have 10 out of 70 that are not in compliance in the spot that you surveyed. I do like the fact that it's a smaller sign, but I'm not willing to go 60 feet.
Okay. I think it's, if you could, help me on your insight. I mean, if the code allows 50 at 700 square feet, I made an overture about just taking the existing poles and we'll lower the the face and make it just what it is now at 57, I mean, is that something that works? And if it doesn't work, then I'll probably need to take continuance and look at options. But
Well, I like the idea of a smaller sign, and this is one way to achieve that. So any kind of compromise would be favorable, in my opinion.
we could go to 57 and commit to that smaller sign if the other two members were inclined.
That's still larger than anything else except your main competitor at 60 feet. And frankly, that sign jumps out at you driving down the highway. And I did drive the highway back and forth twice. And
The one with the truck?
yeah,
Yeah,
the
well-
Peterbilt sign, it jumps out at height, at the scale.
Yeah.
Me.
Anytime you put a truck on top of a couple of poles, I kind of like the DeLisi sign. It's not very tall, but it still sticks out at you.
We still have a motion to deny?
If you want to, do you want a continuance?
Yeah.
I'll
If
withdraw
there's
my,
not a consensus with the other three members, then I'd want to continue 2 weeks to determine whether we go with the zoning route or what we do.
I'll withdraw my recommendation and recommend that we continue this till the next meeting.
And I might be inclined to support the smaller sign, but I would probably not be inclined to go over the heights of the ones that stop at 55. The 60 foot is an anomaly, even in the higher signs.
Okay?
You've got 51, 51, 55, 54, 55.
Okay. So you're at 55 and...
I'm not willing to go above that.
I understand.
And I'm not sure where I stand.
I understand. And
But it's still 3 foot above what it's supposed to be. And I think you...
And how many square feet less? 300.
I think the smaller sign is good, but I still think it ought to be in compliance. And, I might waver a little bit on 2 feet, or 3 feet, I guess, but I'm going to have to sleep on that.
All right. Anybody else have
Do you
any?
have a second? Oh,
And I just wondered if there's any other insight. I don't want to keep you all too long, but, okay,
Motion to
you want
continue.
it to the next meeting?
that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Motion to continue to July 1st meeting?
Your second.
Oh, second.
We have a motion and a second to
Motion.
continue to the next meeting. Please record your vote. Okay. See you then. Okay.
Wait a minute, it's all.
Huh?
Item number 8, case number 13256, appeal of Preservation Oklahoma of the decision of the Downtown Design Review Committee regarding the approval of a certificate of approval for the demolition of 5 buildings located at 300 North Robinson Avenue, 135 Robert S. Kerr, 125 Robert S. Kerr, 120 Robert S. Kerr, and 107 Robert S. Kerr.
I wish to recuse myself.
Okay. Well, we have 3 people here to vote on this, so all 3 would have to concur on whatever motion was made on this. Otherwise, it becomes an automatic continuance. And unfortunately, Mr. Dunn couldn't be here today, but So we're going to hear a statement or information from Susan Miller with the Planning Department first. Well, go ahead, Susan.
Hi, good afternoon. Susan Miller with the Planning Department. I manage the urban design program at the city, and Scotty Montgomery and I are the primary staff to the DDRC. I just want to give a quick summary of the charge of the committee and the intent of the ordinance to kind of get it started.
Okay.
The primary charge of the DDRC is to administer the downtown design ordinance and issue certificates of approval in the downtown area. The Downtown Design Review Committee is charged with applying the criteria in the downtown ordinance in a manner that promotes development and redevelopment consistent with the unique and diverse design elements of downtown. Specifically, the ordinance contains various regulations and criteria that require a dense, high-rise environment in order to define and enclose street corridors, to create a sense of urban activity and establish character of the street and of the districts. So the ordinance focuses on creating building masses on streets by requiring that buildings build to the property line, on corners by prohibiting surface parking lots on corners. Also, there's minimum height limits on new buildings to ensure that intended massing in the street edge is achieved. And this was just a quick overview. I'll be here throughout the meeting if you have any other questions.
Okay, thank you. We heard a lot of testimony, and we didn't have a lot of discussion at the last meeting, so we would hope not to repeat a lot of what was said at the last meeting necessarily. But if there are some additional comments, we'd like to keep those to a shorter time frame, maybe at least maybe 10 minutes for each side if we wanted to say something at this point in time, and then we would have some discussion amongst the members and ask questions if that was the members' request. So we'll ask the appellant to speak first on that.
Yes, and thank you again. We did offer a voluminous amount of information. Do you have our PowerPoint? As the appellant, we understand that we have the last word other than the Board of Adjustment. My name is Barrett Williamson, business address 219 West Boyd, Suite 203, Norman. After I make my brief presentation, Katie Friddle with Preservation Oklahoma, and then followed by Suzette Hatfield, and we will all be brief. History will be written today, whether we're remembered in a good light or a bad light, but we would like to emphasize that the board is entrusted and charged to enforce the vision of the zoning ordinance, which were created by the citizens, study groups over the last 15 years to create a vital mixed-use downtown. The India Temple, I don't want to say much about it other than it's been represented to have a precast facade. It's not precast. It's 3/4 inches of stucco with an aggregate finish over light gauge framing. There's thousands of examples across the United States of buildings that have had similar facades removed successfully. Will we be remembered as acting with the foresight of an enlightened community, or will we bemoan the short-sighted decision resulting from the failure to embrace and enforce our zoning ordinance, a la Urban Renewal Part 2? Your job today is easy. The Sandridge proposal does not comply with the ordinance. Just because they say it doesn't make it so. They use terms like functional and aesthetic obsolescence, doesn't meet our corporate needs. The ordinance doesn't address those criteria. The ordinance identifies mixed uses as commercial, office, residential, retail. As we all know, the last piece of the puzzle that downtown Oklahoma City is struggling with is the retail component, and that follows people. And to get people, we've got to have downtown residential densities. The Sandridge proposal does not. It's a single use kind of like mixed greens. Will we develop a pedestrian-oriented community, or are we going to develop a community that is enslaved to the automobile and the zoning policies of the past? Since our last meeting, we've gone from 700 Facebook members, friends, to 1,700. Our polls are showing the same, 81% in favor of saving the buildings. There's 6 empty plazas or public spaces within 1 block of Sandridge. We've got enough open spaces. You're familiar with the buildings. There's lots of open space around there, before, after. It's a big deal. These are the things that open spaces don't do. They don't generate taxes. They don't generate retail sales. They don't generate income for the city. The existing open spaces, these photographs were all taken the last week of May at noon downtown during business hours, on business days. I just want you to show you the huge amount of people that are in these areas. And the spaces are clean and inviting, but where's the people? And to think that we're going to have more public spaces like this, even with enhanced landscaping, I don't buy the idea that that is the direction that the city needs to go. So open spaces don't create vibrant mixed-use urban environments. Our zoning ordinance is designed to. We saw this slide on the last show. Open spaces don't do these things. That's called the country. So please sustain our appeal.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm Katie Fiddle, Executive Director, Preservation Oklahoma. Address is 405 Northwest 15th, Oklahoma City. And I'm just going to very quickly reiterate our concerns from the previous approval of Sandridge's proposed project and some of the misunderstandings that continue to be presented. There's lengthy discussion of the ordinance in Sandridge's rebuttal of our May 20th argument, and we'll be addressing that in just a moment. What I want to focus on is their arguments for why these buildings have to come down. In their rebuttal, the project proponent repeatedly asserts that the structures are unsound, that they have no economic viability, and that the buildings are not historic. First, the historic qualities of the property. We are told that the buildings likely would not be eligible for such listing without expensive restoration and or reconstruction efforts, and that planning studies conclude that they would not meet Sandridge's needs and purposes. Where are these studies? We have no documentation of whether or to what degree the restoration would be extensive and expensive, because this has not been explored as an option. We are told that Sandridge consulted with the State Historic Preservation Office and that they were told of the significance of the Sandridge and Braniff buildings, and that the India Temple building does not have enough architectural integrity to be listed. However, the additional emails from the State Historic Preservation Office to Sandridge representatives that is omitted from their submittal includes instructions for them on how to go about a more thorough assessment of the historic significance and structural integrity of the buildings, and encouraged them to use tax credits that can be applied to historic buildings not on the National Register. Not exactly a call for the demolition of a useless building. And I have copies here of those additional emails that I'll provide. The State Historic Preservation Office has repeatedly sought to clarify that National Register eligibility and SHPO review is entirely separate and not a part of the Downtown Design Review Committee's process. We wholeheartedly agree with this. National Register eligibility has been emphasized inappropriately by Sandridge. Oklahoma City's ordinance refers to historic properties, but does not single out only those on or eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. It would have been very easy to specify that in the ordinance, but they did not. Just because a building is not National Register eligible, that does not mean that it is not historic. City staff have made it clear in their assessments, provided as part of this review process, that these properties have historic value. This is just a definition of historic from Webster's Dictionary, dating from or preserved from a past time or culture, such as historic buildings and historic artifacts, just reiterating that the National Register is not the
only and final word on what properties constitute a historic part of a town. These are continued before and afters that show that while concerns about qualifying for preservation tax credits are not invalid, the suggestion that these buildings could never qualify shows a serious lack of understanding of how rehab tax credits and the National Register of Historic Places actually work. Lack of National Register eligibility is not static. It can change, and it is not a death sentence. Buildings can still be successfully rehabilitated and placed on the National Register. And the National Register is not an evaluation of their structural or economic viability. As we see here in these images, buildings can be brought back and restored to impressive historic appearances. These are types of projects that we can have in Oklahoma City if we will stand our ground and maintain the standards and goals that the city has set for itself. Having been the certified local government coordinator and liaison to the Massachusetts State Historic Preservation Office for the City of Boston in my previous job, I know that an initial State Historic Preservation Office determination of ineligibility is easily and frequently overcome by property owners who sincerely value their community's historic resources. Second, the economic viability of the structures. Just as Sandridge has relatively little to say on this, I will be brief on this point. The project proponent has made it very clear that they have not considered any options for redevelopment of these sites other than the ones they have proposed, and they have no information to back up claims that it would be uneconomical to rehabilitate these buildings. Their entire conversation centers upon the guesstimated expenses of rehabbing the buildings for their corporate need, the difficulty of introducing assembly spaces or reception halls. Since they propose to replace the buildings not with assembly spaces or reception halls, but with another corporate plaza, their entire discussion of the cost of rehab seems irrelevant. No one is asking that they subsidize the rehabilitation and future use of the buildings, only that, since they're not using them anyway, they let them stand for future use as a possibility. The issue of structural soundness. There's not much left to say. They have told you at the last meeting that they have not done.
We're not hearing any testimony on structural aspects. It's not a part of the decision process. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll skip the next. Okay. That was just a presentation that even though this issue's been raised, there's
I just want to point out that it was brought to our attention that we're not to consider structural aspects of these buildings in this consideration.
Okay.
Am I right on that particular issue? Yes. Okay.
Well, I'll skip. I was going to mention that there were some discrepancies in the understanding of what structural soundness is and is not, but I will omit that. In conclusion, we're told that Sandridge has provided I'm happy to explain what that slide is if you're just perplexed. We're told that Sandridge provided the Downtown Design Review Committee with sufficient information to fully evaluate whether demolition of structures would be consistent with the purpose and intent of the applicable ordinances. As we've heard repeatedly from the project proponent, they have not evaluated these buildings outside their corporate needs which are not the primary concern of the City of Oklahoma City, so all of these claims are unsubstantiated. Oklahoma City needs to hold itself to a higher standard than allowing property owners to do whatever they like, regardless of whether that meets the city's goals for its future. There are a lot of opportunities here for a project that meets the city's goals and Sandridge's needs, and so far we have yet to see why the proposed project is the only option.
Okay, thank you. Suzette or Jonathan? We're a little over our allotment, but I'm going to make sure that everybody's able to.
I'm going to be quick, and I have the first part of the presentation that we're going to go through at the speed of light. But basically, we're here to correct errors and misinformation and their rebuttal. They don't want us to use the purpose and intent of the ordinance, but they want to use factors that aren't in the ordinance at all, but then they don't want to require any documentation of those factors and just take their word for it. So we're going to show you that we really should be using the ordinance to do this. And so to recap, the DDRC used 4 criteria to approve the Sandridge application. Can you click for me, please? 3 of those were based on the personal opinions of the committee members and did not pertain to the ordinance. And as we showed you last time, the DDRC departed drastically from the ordinance. So we decided to think about demolitions in a different way, because in their rebuttal, they said since there's no real checklist for demolitions, then the DDRC could do whatever they wanted. So here's the ordinance, and we thought, all right, let's think about demolitions in a way, do these buildings contribute to these goals for Oklahoma City? Is the structure compatible with the commercial, cultural, historic, and governmental significance of the district? Can the structure be used to promote downtown as a vital mixed-use area? Does the building belong in a network of pleasant public spaces and pedestrian amenities in downtown? Does development of the structure preserve and restore historic resources and circulation patterns in downtown? And do the buildings contribute to appropriate and complementary transitions between each of the downtown districts? So I started making a decision matrix and decided it looked more like a bingo card, so we decided to call it Building Bingo and go building by building to see how the features of that building contributed to these goals in the ordinance. And I do have dots going through this, but what I'll do in the interest of time is just speed ahead so that you can see how the buildings stacked up, whether they contributed commercially, and obviously they all have been commercial buildings at one time or another and do contribute commercially to there. Then this is from the staff report about their cultural contribution. The staff, and we agree, believes that they are local legacy resources and should be saved. So we put some dots there. And the OCU Law School, what was the old YMCA building? This documents the history of Kerr-McGee and the Kermack building. So yes, 4 out of the 5 contributed culturally. And then what about historically? Well, again, we agree with staff that there would be a serious adverse effect on downtown if these were lost. First Skywalk, First Mechanical Garage, there's the historic component. Only one building contributed to the government significance of downtown, and that's the India Temple, which survived, or which served as our state capital. Mixed use, they've all been mixed use or could be mixed use in the future, so all buildings get a dot there. We have another bingo. And then as far as pedestrian amenities, as Susan Miller said, we need a dense downtown with the street walls. All of these buildings provide that, except for the 120 building, which is the parking garage, and parking garages just traditionally aren't pedestrian friendly. And then Catherine Montgomery, who's actually paid by the city of Oklahoma City to have an opinion, described those buildings. Could they be made for mixed use, rehab for contemporary uses? And she started with the India Temple and said absolutely yes. So we give the India Temple a dot, and she did evaluate the other buildings as well. This is another quote from Catherine, and she's here. I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any of your questions as well. So we have to give all those other buildings a dot on our bingo card because they can be rehabbed to meet the goals of Oklahoma City. And since those buildings have been standing for decades, the circulation patterns have developed around them. They are comforting to pedestrians. They do anchor the streets. They are part of the historic circulation patterns in Oklahoma City. So while our bingo card isn't a blackout bingo, we do show that the buildings contribute to many of the goals in the ordinance and should be saved. And what does Sandridge say about the buildings? Well, Sandridge continues to focus on their corporate needs and convenience, and those are not addressed by the ordinance. Convenience and cost are not hardships considered by the courts. So Sandridge says that the meaning of an ordinance, like that of a statute, is defined from the language found in its text. It should have its plain and ordinary meaning. We agree, and that's why we'll look again at the authority of the DDRC for demolition of a building. It's very plain. Both the committee and the staff are given authority for multiple buildings for remodeling and new construction and modifications, but each is only given authority for demolition of a structure. We think that's about as plain as you can get. Singular, plural, singular, plural. So let's look at, let's go forward and say, Sandridge says that the inclusion of a purpose and intent clause in an ordinance is a mere guide rather than a legal requirement. But the Municipal Code and the Oklahoma Supreme Court say otherwise. Let's look at the ordinance. Okay, you're familiar with it, so let's just focus. Downtown Design Review Committee and staff shall apply these criteria. These criteria are the purpose and intent. It doesn't say they may apply them. They don't say kind of, sort of. It says the committee and the staff shall apply these criteria. And then let's go on and see what the courts have to say. I looked at Sandridge's response brief and thought, wow, they had to look hard to find any cases that dealt with purpose and intent, and all their sources came from other states. And now I know why, because when I researched it, I found out that the Oklahoma Supreme Court has ruled on purpose, intent, and spirit many times. And Sandridge obviously didn't like what our top court had to say, so they didn't use it. So this case, obviously, the court was asked to look at the spirit of an ordinance, and the court said, let's just look at it for a minute. Go ahead. Of course, this deals with the Board of Adjustment. The strict letter of the law of the ordinance may be departed from only where there are practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships in the way of carrying it out, and in such manner that the spirit of the ordinance may be observed. And continuing, the acts of the Board of Adjustment are limited by the provisions of the ordinance. Okay? And then another case, still.
How many of these do you have? Because we're
Not very many.
Okay.
I just want to show continuity in the Supreme Court rulings so that there is no doubt in your mind what you're asked to do today. So, again, the court said that any exceptions have to be in harmony with the purpose and intent. And this case, I'll just skip through. It's just that the purpose of zoning does inconvenience some property owners, but we have to consider the greater good. And then this is very important, because this ordinance went through the legislative body of the city. This is what the public, what the citizens want. It's gone through the process. This is due process. And so that's why we're asking you, because this ordinance has been placed in law through this due process, we ask that the ordinance be enforced and that you deny the demolitions of these buildings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan? Did you want to speak? You just limit to just a couple of minutes, and then we're going to...
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Adjustment, I'm Jonathan Poston with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, Director of the Southwest Office of the National Trust for Oklahoma and 3 other states, headquartered in Fort Worth. And you have a letter from, I hope you have a letter from me, maybe in your packets. And I will not go through that letter. Simply, it's there because I wanted to reiterate to you how very strongly the National Trust feels about these buildings. We think these are intrinsic to the importance of and historic importance of downtown Oklahoma City. We think their retention is very important. And we do agree with our partner organization, Preservation Oklahoma, and with the other opponents who are part of the appeal that the decision of the Design Review Committee was in error. And we would also continue with our view that these buildings are historic and that they should be evaluated and assessed, and we continue to offer a sum of up to $18,000 to pay for an assessment of these buildings to settle that issue if it continues to be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hill, did you want to address this? We'll probably do it this way, and then we may have some comments here, and then we'll have a little closing if you want to.
Mr. Chairman, I had some corrections to the staff report of the Board of Adjustment I'd like to read into the record. Very quickly, paragraph 1C, Preservation Oklahoma is not the applicant. We are. So I think you should cite that section of the ordinance that permits an aggrieved party to appeal. I believe it's 3250.4F. I think we have identified Preservation Oklahoma as the appellant. The next thing is in paragraph 2A, I would end the first sentence after committee, the second line, begin the next sentence with item 1 of the application was a request, end quote. And then based on the DDRC minutes dated April 8, I suggest that the last paragraph on page 1 be modified to state, quote, before voting on the Sandridge application, 6 members of the committee stated that, colon, the buildings are now structurally unsafe, the buildings are functionally and aesthetically obsolete, and economically their retention and restoration would not be a viable option for Sandridge's purposes. We've heard a lot today about this case from the Preservation Oklahoma proponents of the appeal. I want to point out that the sole question to be determined by the Board of Adjustment is whether the DDRC action in approving Sandridge's application for a certificate of approval was in accordance with applicable ordinances. Secondly, Preservation Oklahoma has the burden of proof that DDRC acted improperly.
Can you Move that away from your mouth just a little bit there.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Is that better?
Well, and move it a little further away.
Is that better?
You've got a good, got a good voice. So.
Okay, thank you. The basis for Preservation Oklahoma's appeal is that Sandridge's application and the proposed master plan did not meet the requirements of the ordinances applicable to projects located in the downtown business district, and DDRC acted in contravention of or exceeded the authority granted by those ordinances. I do want to point out that Preservation Oklahoma did not attend either of the meetings of the DDRC held on March 18 or April 8. I think that's somewhat telling. Secondly, I think that it's important to tell you what has happened, what has transpired since May the 20th. We have received additional letters of support for the Sandridge project from Chuck Wiggin, owner of the 101 Park Avenue building, and an ardent and committed preservationist who has now supported the Sandridge Commons project. We've also received a letter from the Skirvin Hotel manager, probably the shining star for historic preservation in Oklahoma City. And thirdly, we've received a letter from Downtown OKC, Inc., which is an organization that represents all of downtown Oklahoma City. And to my knowledge, there has been no opposition to the Sandridge Commons project from any owner of downtown commercial property. So we have massive support for this project. I realize that is not a component of the ordinances, but it's certainly something that you should be aware of. And most of this support, frankly, has not been sought. It's been volunteered. This is a major economic development effort by the City of Oklahoma City to retain and keep Sandridge in Oklahoma City and have this location be its corporate headquarters. 500 jobs, up to 1,000 jobs, hopefully as it expands. So it's supported by not only the City of Oklahoma City, but the DDRC supported this with a 6-to-1 vote, which is overwhelming, really. Very competent people. I think they absolutely understand their ordinances and understand how to apply them. And overall, the amount of investment in downtown Oklahoma City that is supporting this project is in the billions of dollars. And I think that is very, very significant. You know, we had the National Conference of Mayors here last weekend, and it was an amazing event. I was fortunate to be invited to one of the events on the rooftop of the Oklahoma City Museum of Art, and I didn't know anybody. And all I could hear people talking about was Oklahoma City, downtown Oklahoma City, how amazing it was. Talk about the Devon Tower. They had been briefed on the Sandridge project, and they were aware. They had a big event at the Sonic corporate headquarters. They were just in awe of Oklahoma City. And their question of me was, how can you all undertake these wonderful projects in these very difficult economic times? So others are looking at us very carefully. Two other things that happened since May the 20th. Since the applicable ordinances don't require a structural engineering report, and that's clear, we thought it would be helpful to send you a summary of what Sandridge did to evaluate these existing buildings over the 1.5-year master planning period that they engaged in. We sent you that, as well as the answers to the questions that were posed by the DDRC members to Sandridge, which I thought were very, very helpful in terms of evaluating these existing buildings. Finally, we sent you, because the DDRC record is so voluminous, we sent you a summary of the issues and our response to the issues presented by Preservation Oklahoma's appeal, together with the various facts that were considered. The applicable ordinances. The Downtown Design District ordinances, you've seen them, Hatfield showed them to you, but I'm sure you're familiar with them, and we cite them in our summary. But the Downtown Design District ordinances include development regulations and development criteria that the DDRC must apply in reviewing applications for certificates of approval. The development regulations and the development criteria for downtown design districts are preceded by a purpose and intent provision, a preamble, if you will. If you'd like, I could read that or not, but I do think that it's critical that you understand the provisions of that. And it is clear from the language, the plain language in that provision, that we're talking about something that is a preamble and not a legal requirement.
I'm going to ask you to push that aside a little bit more. Sorry.
Is that better?
That's fair. That's
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman.
It messes up the tape.
So basically, the purpose and intent section, it says the commercial district is intended for the conduct of all forms of business activity, including mixed uses in a single building within the central area of the city. Development regulations and development criteria, if you look at the rest of it, are intended to. And then it lists 5 different components. And those components do not apply to a single project. They apply to all of downtown Oklahoma City. This is the direction that the City of Oklahoma City has given to the Downtown Design Review Committee in terms of development of our entire downtown. So I suggest to you that those are not legal requirements. They are simply guidelines to be considered. And I think the proper way to do that is exactly the way that the DDRC did it, which they considered the project itself, Sand Ridge Commons, and then they looked at it and the overall project, not just the India Temple building or the Kermack building. They looked at the entire project and made a decision that it was consistent with the purpose and intent provisions of the ordinance, and that overall this project met those requirements. It enhanced the development of downtown Oklahoma City and really fit in very, very well with that overall plan. And I think the other thing that I will say is that we do know about historic preservation. We've done a number of those projects. We do agree with Preservation Oklahoma that the ordinance is controlling eligibility or ineligibility of a property for listing on the National Register is not mentioned in the ordinances, and it's not a critical factor in making a decision. However, as part of the due diligence that was done during the master planning process, certainly, among other things, the Sand Ridge architects and representatives considered the historic implications of these buildings and visited with Dr. Blackburn and Melvina Heisch at the Oklahoma State Historic Preservation Office, and learned a couple of things. They learned that the Braniff building, in fact, was on the National Register of Historic Places, which we knew anyway, but they also learned that the State Historic Preservation Office felt that the Sand Ridge Tower, the old Kerr-McGee Tower, was perhaps the most important property on that entire site. So I think clearly, whether you call it purpose and intent guidelines, whether you call it spirit of the ordinance, we are saving, preserving, and enhancing over 75% of the square footage on that site, which is, I think, is a very strong position to take. We honor historic preservation, Sand Ridge does, and it should be clear from that we are not at all taking that lightly. We're taking it very, very seriously. There is just a time when certain buildings just don't work anymore, and that is the case with the ones that we have proposed for demolition. So anyway, it's really black letter law. I don't care if we cite the New York Supreme Court or AMJUR or the California courts or whatever the jurisdiction is, that a purpose and intent clause in an ordinance is a mere guide rather than a legal requirement. And again, that's a critical part of what we're talking about. In other words, as I said earlier, this purpose and intent provision applies to the entire downtown area. Again, I think that is very, very critical. Before going any further, and again, that's the critical part of it, the staff report also was focused on, I believe, by the Preservation Oklahoma representatives, and it recommended that all items in Sand Ridge's application be approved, everything, except demolition of the India Temple building and the 3 linked buildings at Robinson and Robert S. Kerr. Preservation Oklahoma appealed the decision also to demolish the 120 Robert S. Kerr building, which we found rather curious that they had done that. But in any event, they did so. The staff report concluded specifically that all applicable development regulations and development criteria had been satisfied, and that no variances or exceptions, none, were necessary in connection with demolition of the buildings or redevelopment of those portions of the site. And even though Sandridge recognized, the DDRC staff recognized that Sandridge had complied with all applicable development regulations, the staff recommended that that DDRC should deny Sandridge's proposal to demolish the India Temple building and the linked buildings because, quote, this proposal does not comply with the purpose and intent of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance. So the staff put themselves in the position from a subjective standpoint of looking at the purpose and intent section, which again is not a legal requirement. But I think the DDRC itself took that position. They did so because there is no criteria for demolition in the DDRC demolition provision, none. So obviously they had to hang their hat on something, and they, from a subjective standpoint, they looked at these different components within the overall purpose and intent provision. They also looked at all of the information, the massive amount of information that Sandridge had accumulated over that period, over the 1.5-year period of time, formulating this master plan, which works for Sandridge. I guess that's another point that's really critical. This is a corporate headquarters. This is not something that we're going to put on the market for sale or for rent. I mean, that would be a disastrous situation in Oklahoma City, given the current vacancy rates, the current markets, the ULI report that we've all read about the limitations, the fact that additional buildings are going to be put on the market soon when the Devon Tower is completed. Just would have been, it is not in Oklahoma City's best interest for those buildings to be offered to third parties. And certainly that is not Sandridge's intention and has never been.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Is there anybody else that was going to speak for your, are you going to speak for?
I was going to give Rob Rogers a moment to talk about the process that was undertaken.
So we got, in equity, we've got about another 3 minutes here.
Okay.
On the presentation.
Let's see. Rob, you want to go ahead and just talk about, and this is the process that was undertaken, this is critical, by Sandridge in evaluating the overall project to determine whether it met the purpose and intent provisions, the spirit, if you will, of the ordinance.
Okay. About 3 minutes.
Thanks. Rob Rogers, Marvel Architects. I'll be very brief. In fact, I think you received a summary of the planning process that was among the documents delivered to you on the 17th. And I think, in essence, what I'd like to do is, rather than review those two things, is just very briefly say that process, which included many professionals, many parties, the master planning process, a number of meetings with the city officials in the planning department, where we agreed on some things and didn't agree on all other things. That is the nature of a planning and master planning process. And you will never get 100% consensus across the board for everything, but you do the majority, the best good, and the most possible that you can with a plan, your client, the city, the surrounding elements, and those engaged. And I think what we've seen is that, in fact, there are subjective components to this plan, the majority of which are received incredibly positively by the DDRC by a 6-to-1 vote, by our neighbors, by those that own properties around that consider the value of their own property or the engagement of their tenancies relative to this plan. And there are pieces of this plan that some individuals with particular objectives object to. And it's the nature of a plan. And I think rather than revisiting the entire thing, I'd simply offer in my own professional respect that, you know, it's not unusual to have some contention, some disagreement about how things actually move forward. Seldom do you get 100% on anything, but you do the best that you can with the right moves at the right time, with the opportunities that exist. And I think in the project to move forward at this time with 180, with the other things going forward, is, I'll borrow the words of one of the ones from Preservation Oklahoma, is in fact in the greater good, for the City of Oklahoma, and I think that's easily reflected in the support we've received by the vast majority of people who've had an opportunity to review and see the project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, we can open this up for questions if you'd like, or we can make a...
we're going to, I'm going to ask the other members here whether or not they have questions. And so we'll do that, and then, or comments or statements. I have some organized thoughts myself that I'd like to present, and maybe some of the other members would like to do that as well. Anything you wanted to, David? Or?
I would like to know, and I'm not really sure if there's anybody in the city here that is familiar with the vacancy of those buildings, how long they've been vacant to this point. Is there anybody here that can furnish that information? Susan? Nobody?
Rick Brown, Sand Ridge Energy, 123 Robert S. Kerr. The buildings over the years have been, the Brant building's been empty since the 80s, and I'm going to be very rounded here on this because I don't have the facts right in front of me. The 111 building, I think it was brought up last meeting that it had been occupied over the years, and that is true. We had one floor that we had a temporary file project in, and it was utilized for overflow. One floor since the 1980s, basically.
In which building?
The Indian Temple building.
The 107 building? That's what I described, 107. Robert S. Kerr.
Yeah. 135 building, we moved the last tenants out in 1999, as that was our office services department at Kerr McGee. The only thing left in the building at that time was the fitness center and the maintenance office, our maintenance crew, and that was on the first floor only.
That's which building, 135?
That's the 125 Roberts, 135 and 300. The 300 North Robinson building's been empty since the 80s, that 8-story structure at the west side.
All right. That's all. You have any questions or comments? You have comments?
I do. I'm just trying to figure out when the proper time to make them is. You know, I've looked at this in a lot of different ways, and you know, what I've tried to figure out in my own mind is what is the holistic intent and spirit of the entire ordinance. Do the buildings contribute to the urban fabric and help establish and contribute to the character of the street and this section of downtown? And then I've asked myself, by removing and putting in what is proposed, are they furthering the directive of the guidelines and more effectively promoting the downtown design district intentions? And those are some of the processes that I've used and questions I've asked myself in trying to come to conclusions from all this information that's being presented to us. For now.
That's all for now? Okay. Well, I've organized some thoughts, and I think the buildings have to be looked at separately. I think there's some separate issues with regards to each one of them and how they, a bad blanket approach really doesn't work on these, and because each one of them affects the development or redevelopment of Oklahoma City differently, and the presence or absence of each building relates to the ordinance. Oklahoma City and other cities go through unique changes through the years. Oklahoma City has had its own pattern and personality, has a variety of architectural styles and placement of buildings, as well as a series of plazas and open spaces. It's not a city like New York City or some other highly dense city, but more like many others in the Midwest with less density. Each street that it fronts on has, that this area has fronts on, has its own personality, and the impact of the redevelopment should take this into account. The staff has even talked about some of the differences with regards to street walls, the importance of street walls in certain areas and that type of thing. There seems to be room for consideration of the sentiment and the needs of the community in the development process at the time and what is most appropriate at various stages in the evolution of the downtown district. It's obvious that many changes are taking place, including the addition of 1 million square feet of office space. There's changing requirements for building codes and bringing long empty buildings back into service. In my opinion, the DDRC was incorrect in its assessment of 300 North Robinson. The character of Robinson is defined by the street wall. In my opinion, I've been down there on Sundays when I could spend a lot of time looking at that, and I think this building is important to that particular feature of our particular city. It'd be a very significant location for the redevelopment. This could be a very significant building in the process of redevelopment of the plaza and the park redevelopment and everything and the other amenities. In my opinion, the 135 and the 125 building, they're listed separately, and they're additions, I guess, are not significant or historical, and they're confusing in the flow of the redevelopment of this area. They've been cited by reliable sources as not being significant, and I agree with DDRC on those buildings. I hadn't thought that 120 was a point of contention. It was the appeal was on all of them, but it didn't appear to be a point of contention, although a part of that, and the applicant has agreed to construct a new building with its own architecture and respecting the diversity aspect of the ordinance. And I agree with the DDRC on demolition of that structure contingent upon the new building going in. The structure I've had the most difficulty in considering a decision on is 107 Robert S. Kerr, which is the India Temple. There's been credible testimony supporting preservation and the possibility of demolition. Building has not been supported as historical or significant by some credible sources, and the longevity of the building is the difficulty that I've had. It's been changed substantially, and it seems apparent it would likely sit vacant because the owner is not interested in restoring that building. The current owner is been committed to preservation of the block as a whole, has been talked about, and I think that that's missed a little bit. Is that that block may be sitting vacant today, if not for the commitment. And redevelopment is a very difficult process. Rehab is a very difficult process. Much more difficult than building some new buildings out in the suburbs someplace, and my experience is much more expensive. And so one of the good points is that there is a plan for development of a street wall along Broadway, even though Broadway itself does not have the kind of street wall presence that Robinson does. There are a lot of buildings that do create that along that way. The commitment to the Braniff building, which has been vacant so long, into the tower, and as I've said before, I believe that 300 Broadway should be kept in place. It's caused me to think that that's a tall order in the kind of environment we're dealing in, and because there's not hard evidence on the historical nature of the building, I agree with the DDRC on the destruction of that building. Those are my comments right now.
Just a couple comments. I too, I think we made a big mistake in the 70s by doing what we did to our city, although it has somewhat proven to be an asset. I am very concerned about our past I am more concerned about our future. And I, too, believe that the India Temple is a building that could be preserved. And I think it's a building that should be preserved. On the other hand, I have no problem with the demolition of the rest of the buildings. I think it's one of those things that the India Temple could be an asset to Standridge if they will fit that into their plan, and I won't, rather than a better word, correctly, okay? But I think that would be an asset to the Commons. I really do. And that's, in general, I don't understand these buildings sitting vacant for so long, and all of a sudden we, get interested in the building to preserve those buildings. Why didn't we do that 10, 15 years ago before they were bought? And, possibility of some of those being torn down anyway.
Takes money to do all of that.
Well, I also have a problem with the 300 Robinson building being demolished as well. It seems like it was economically viable a few years ago to certain interested parties. That street wall along Robinson is very powerful, and some of the most powerful downtown streets we have are Harvey between Robert S. Kerr and 4th, and Park between Robinson and Broadway. And it's that similar feeling that we have along parts of Robinson. And it's that street wall, it's that downtown experience created by the street wall. 120 Robert S. Kerr is being proposed to have a new building take its place. I think that's in spirit with the ordinance. 135 and 125. I believe that the corner buildings are the ones that are really the important ones to look at that preserve the urban fabric. I know India Temple has some questions on if it's salvageable, and I still have those questions. I was involved in a much smaller slipcover project on Film Row, where we successfully removed similar panels along the front of a building and repaired and restored it. With the evidence that's presented, I'm unclear whether that's possible with 107 Kerr, with India Temple. But I'm not convinced that it's not.
Okay. Here again, I'd like to vote on each one of these separately. They've been discussed separately, impact separately, and even though they were, excuse me, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, do you mind if I make a couple of points?
Yeah. Well, hold on just a minute, please.
Sure.
Hold on. How do we feel about that as a board?
I feel that, and I think that's what our obligation is, and I think they ought to be taken building at a time. I really do.
Okay. Right. What I was going to do is then give 5 minutes to you and 5 minutes to the appellant.
That's fine.
Here to discuss that, and then they get the last word on the deal that way.
That's fine.
Is that okay?
That's fine. And I'll invite Rob Rogers to join me on this, but again, this was a master plan for a corporate headquarters, and part of the Sandridge process was to evaluate each of those buildings. And the memorandum that we sent to you, the summary, shows the floor plate sizes of these buildings and how tiny they are. And, for example, you mentioned the 300 North Robinson building, floor plate of 6,475 square feet. Mm-hmm. Putting that in common context of uses now, the tower, the Sandridge Tower, is 14,000 to 14,500 feet of floor. Leadership Square is over 22,000 square feet of floor. So the trend, certainly with respect to modern office space, is much, much higher
I don't think that's what we're talking about here. I mean, if you look at the ordinance as a whole, we're not just looking at this as the possibility of being office space.
I understand.
And so,
but I think
in that context, where you're limiting the thinking about how we're considering each building.
Well, I guess the problem I have is that these, again, it's an integrated college corporate campus, and it simply does not work. If you start peeling parts of it away, it was thoughtfully done, and I don't know where we end up if we are sitting here with two buildings on the corner that are not part of the master plan, and I think Sandridge will have to consider whether, frankly, downtown Oklahoma City is the right place for its corporate headquarters. So it's
and they'll have to do that, but we're bound by a number of different issues than whether or not it'll be an office building or not.
Rob Rogers again, if I may. I think it's indicative that, at least from comments so far, I haven't heard you vote, that even amongst the three of you, you don't agree on what the important buildings are. And you each have your own, whether it's an urbanist instinct about a particular street wall or a certain sentimentality for a historical condition, even if the fabric is not completely there. And I'm absolutely sympathetic because it's what we've been doing for a year and a half. And we are trying to find a solution that doesn't parse and chop this into a bunch of pieces, that doesn't have coherence or a capacity to be constructed, but is in fact an overall plan that increases the long-term urbanity of the site. It increases the value of the site and all those properties around it, and it takes charge and preserves the most consequential historic pieces. The ones, in fact, that everybody does agree on are the most important historic buildings, the Braniff and potentially the Pietro Beluschi Tower. And in fact, that's what we've been doing for the last year and a half. And I guess I'm not surprised, but I'm got also understanding that if your sole focus is historic preservation and you're not really concerned about the economic viability of a building or of a corporate presence downtown, or what time and cost and opportunity really means to the potential for a project, then you've got one standard, which is it's an old building, it's really cool, how can we take it down? But we've heard everything from these buildings work as seniors housing. These might work as low-rent apartments, and not in this lifetime. So we've tried to come up with a plan that addresses all of those issues, lots of different criteria, and put it forth to you. And I don't know whether you're actually able to vote piece by piece on these, but I think the appeal is based on an overall plan. Our submission is on an overall plan. And I'd just like you to consider, we've been through this same conversation at great length. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Again, Katie Friddle, Preservation Oklahoma. The project proponents said they would not know where they would end up if they had other buildings on their block. They would end up with an office space in a city, because that's what you have. You have blocks of buildings that are not necessarily all part and parcel of one thing, that have diverse mixed use, as the ordinance asks for. There's been a lot of conversation about corporate needs versus community goals, and I think this is something that we can still balance, just as you all have expressed concerns about individual buildings on the campus. These can be considered individually. The point that we're replacing, that these buildings have small floor plates, currently they're proposing to replace them with no floor plates. So that doesn't seem to be a particular concern. There have been plenty of interest expressed in purchasing various buildings on the campus in the past by other entities who were interested in redeveloping them for other purposes. So the issue of whether that can happen has still not been explored. The issue of what is still intact under these facades has still not been explored. So to dismiss these buildings on those grounds seems premature. And just in addition, we have city staff here who has been inside these buildings, who has extensive experience as an architect with preservation projects and rehab projects, and if there are some of those concerns and questions about the condition of the building and the historic character of the building, then perhaps that staff person could be called upon to answer some of those questions. We agree with the comments about the strength of the corner buildings and the overall role they play in those main arteries through Oklahoma City, and I think we would be amenable to the buildings being voted on one by one and hearing out those concerns about each individual site. And one other concern about the vacancies in the buildings is that they were never on the market during that entire time period that they were vacant. So there wasn't really an option for them to not be vacant. They didn't sit empty waiting for someone to purchase them. They were not available for purchase, and they were just not being utilized by their owner at the time. And 135 and 125, Robert S. Kerr, were also part of proposals to be redeveloped for housing as well and be converted to residential use.
You got it?
And that's our response. So.
Thanks very much. Okay. Well, I think we'll entertain motions on each building then.
I think I have a couple of comments, though. I don't know if any of us are, I'm certainly not just approaching this from the historic preservation side of things. I'm approaching it on what does our ordinance say, for the record. And just because buildings are not part of a corporate plan does not mean they meet the criteria of the ordinance. I would make a motion to I guess we're making it's either affirming or reversing or denying. I'm going to make a motion on 120 Robert S. Kerr to affirm the decision of the Downtown Design Review Commission based on it meeting the intent of the ordinance that governs it.
State that again. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Make a motion to for 120 Robert S. Kerr to uphold the DDRC decision to allow for demolition.
To allow for demolition.
Correct.
Okay. I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Everyone record their votes. Okay. That one's approved.
And also, for the record, I do think we have the right to take these individually based on the way our ordinance is written.
We're going to.
Yeah, just.
I will make a motion to not do demolition on 300 North Robinson, which is the India Temple.
300 North Robinson is the Kermac. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
107 R.S. Kerr is the India Temple.
I'm sorry. No.
Okay.
I'm talking about the India Temple.
You are? 107?
107.
So 107, and the motion would be to deny.
Motion would be to
That's
deny.
right. It is to deny.
Is that correct?
Right.
That's a motion to reverse the DDRC decision, correct? I'll second that motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Please record your vote.
So that was a 2-1.
That's 2-1, so that's continued.
Regarding 300 North Robinson, I will make a motion to reverse the decision of the DDRC, which would not allow for demolition of that building.
To not allow?
Not allow demolition of 300 North Robinson.
can't? Okay, that fails for a lack of second then. Do you want to make another motion? Different motion?
I'll make a motion to deny the demolition of...
No.
I'm sorry. Deny the appeal.
Deny the appeal.
Okay.
Okay.
I won't second that one.
So that one continues. For a lack of second, continues.
I'll make a motion on 135 Robert S. Kerr to uphold the DDRC decision to allow for demolition.
Second.
It's 135.
135 Robert S. Kerr.
The motion is second. Record your vote. Okay, that one's approved.
So the only one left is 107?
125. 125 Robert S.
Okay, 125. I've got my... I will make a motion to deny the appeal.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Record your vote. Okay. That one's approved.
So that's
So
all.
we have a continuance. We have a continuance on 107 and 300 North Robinson. Then. That's to the automatically to the next meeting. Okay. Thank you all for coming.
We need to have specific findings, so are we saying that we agree with the findings of the DDRC?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a 5-minute break? I'd like to grab a glass of water and
Okay.
for the
5-minute break.
there somewhere where I'm supposed to sign in? I have not done it. I thought I was going to be at the bottom of the docket, not the middle.
Okay, we're going to reconvene now, and here's the next item.
Item number 9, case number 13244, appeal of Bert and Mary Bowman of the decision of the Historic Preservation Commission regarding the denial of a certificate of appropriateness to construct an addition to the rear of the house located at 524 Northwest 17th Street.
Okay. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Lana Colmia. I am an attorney in Oklahoma City representing Bert and Mary Bowman. And as she stated, we are appealing the decision of the Historic Preservation Commission as it relates to one item and one item only, that being the addition to the back of this home. For purposes of my discussion with you today, I would like the opportunity to speak, and I guess the easiest way is to show which particular papers relating to the staff report of March 3rd, 2010 that were attached that are pertinent to my discussion for today. If you look at the plan or the design of the west elevation, the west elevation itself, which I believe was on page 33 of that March 3rd report. Are we there? You can see we are discussing this extension, which is 15 feet 8 inches going to the south, to the back of this home. The roof, at the time of the hearing of March the 3rd, the roof was and still is not completed. We only have at this time, and at the time of that hearing, there was a temporary structure that had been placed that was a tin roof. But concerning what the design is as was proposed and what has happened now, this roof was not constructed, and that information was, of course, given to the commission at the time of our hearing of March the 3rd. There was no objection, at least none was stated from anyone that I'm aware,
at the time of that hearing to anything as it relates to the west elevation of this addition to the home. I had, for purposes of this appeal, a transcript made of the hearing before the commission of that afternoon, which at some particular points in time I may be referring to. But after reviewing that transcript and the CD that was attendant to that, there was no objection at all to that west elevation of that addition. Now, I'm going now to what would be page 2. Looking at the south elevation. Which is page 32 of that report. This is where I believe the rub had occurred. When you look at that south elevation itself, there were pictures that were provided of what was there now, and I realized that there was a structure there that had been built without permission, without any approval, that was there at the time that my clients purchased this home. The history of the home is that the previous owner had begun this addition without a certificate of appropriateness being given at all. It was then this home was foreclosed upon. It went to a sheriff's sale, and at the sheriff's sale, my clients purchased this home. It took some period of time after that auction to have occurred for the deed to be provided to them because of problems associated with a sheriff's deed and a mortgage company. But once it was given to them, once the sheriff's deed was given to us and the mortgage done and everything had actually changed legal title, my client submitted the request for the certificate of appropriateness on this particular addition, the back addition, which was denied. At that hearing before the commission, the rub came because of the pictures that were taken at the time, just prior to the hearing. The pictures showed this back without any windows, at least they were not apparent from the picture. And they said, they asked me, are you going to be building the structure as per the design or what's there today? And they had made a comment like there was a difference between what's there today and the design that was presented. They had pointed out that there was a specific difference, and at the time I didn't catch what was going on with them, but because they did not see these windows going across the top, they said that there was a difference. But in actuality, although the windows did not show in the picture, looking at this south elevation, those windows were actually there. You could see them from the inside, but at the time, when the previous owner was getting ready to do that and then put the insulation over them, which had not yet been cut, but from the inside, the windows were there. From the outside, it appeared as though that they were not. I can tell you today, emphatically, without any doubt, the drawing as submitted, the request as submitted, and the materials presented before the commission then and this board today, there is no difference between what is out there, although it is not completed by any stretch of the imagination, between what's there and what is presented. The materials are the same, everything is the same, with the exception of a roof that has not yet been completed. We believe with this board's approval, the roof line could be completed by the end of the summer. But in looking at the specific request and looking at what was originally there, the picture, here's a picture of a south elevation. Excuse me, that's the wrong. This is the south elevation. There is no difference from the original. This is the original wall that is no longer there. From this original wall, the distance between from end to end is 27.8 feet of the original wall. That is exactly the same distance as is on the plan and what is there today. There's no difference. On the from the original wall, the height of 23.1 inches on either side is what that was.
Feet?
Yes?
23 feet?
It's 23 feet, .1. What did I say? Inches. So please forgive me.
Just want to make sure the record is correct on that.
Yes, we are. There is no difference at all with the addition as planned and what is there today. None whatsoever. The windows on this drawing, as I stated to you, were there at the time, although they believe that they weren't because the picture didn't show it. When the owner, the previous owner, had put up the insulation and was given the order to stop all construction because of the lack of a certificate of appropriateness, all work did cease. But that doesn't mean that those windows weren't there. They were, in fact, there. In 1998, getting a little bit more history of this particular piece of property, the previous owner had submitted and was approved, although it lapsed for improper time. The first floor of the upper deck approval that expired had an outside stairwell. The outside stairwell was over here. When the owner had presented that to the Historic Preservation, they did not like having the stairwell on the side of the house that would lead to this upper deck, because that was what was originally done. There was going to be this extension as a one-story addition, with an upper deck. The Historic Preservation Board said they did not like the stairwell that was on the outside of the building. So the previous owner refigured it and put the stairwell, a spiral staircase, inside of this, which is the reason why there are no windows or anything on the east side of that southern elevation. Then in 2005, the previous owner went ahead and did the extension, the addition, and made it a two-story addition, again, without a certificate of appropriateness. But these are the plans that were submitted, and this is the addition that is being, although inappropriately, that was being put together. My clients, the new owners of this property, have every intention to do exactly as this was presented in the plan, and that's what's there today. We have presented to you a photograph of what is there today, which shows the addition, southern elevation. Now, this is just a temporary thing because of the machinery that is out there for purposes of the construction. That's got nothing to do with this, but I am trying to show, since that March 3rd hearing, these windows, the insulation was cut to show where those windows were, that they are exactly as was presented to the commission. Everything is as was presented. For a temporary fix, there's a temporary wood placed over there just to make sure that everything is protected. But that's why we wanted to show that those windows were there then and they are there now. When you review the staff report that was presented to the commission, it stated at that time that the plans as drawn and presented were in compliance, and the proposed material change in appearance would not have a substantial adverse effect on the aesthetic, historical, or architectural significance. and the value of the historic property and district according to the preservation guidelines and standards for Oklahoma City Historic Districts for Oklahoma City and according to the provisions of the Oklahoma City Municipal Code. The staff recommended this addition. The materials, there's nothing wrong with the materials. It didn't change anything of significance as far as the staff was concerned. In reviewing the transcript, the only problem that the commission had was that they believed, whether my assistance in that was part of it or not, they believed that what was being done was not what was presented, and therefore denied this case. The question to this board is, what is there about this design of the addition that should not be approved? Those that stood before the commission to oppose it had various reasons for doing so, mostly with regards to the previous owner. I can't do anything about the previous owner. I cannot do anything with regards to any lawsuits that were against the previous owner or whatever is pending. I can't do anything about that. There were a lot about who really holds title to this. If there is a question as to the title owner, it being other than my clients, then file something. File whatever you want to. But that's got nothing to do with this particular addition to this home and whether it is appropriate for continuation and for finalization. There is even those who said, you know, they just want this place cleaned up. So do we. We want this home. We want it in compliance. We want to do whatever is necessary so that this board is happy, the Historic Preservation Commission is happy, the neighbors are happy. We want to do that. We just don't see any reason to deny this addition as was presented. If you look at those pictures specifically, because they said it was bulky looking. Now, that's not a direct quote. I can find the direct quote if you so desire. But this is the way the house in the back used to look. This is the way the house in the back, or pretty close, would look in the future. There's really no distinction. We're only extending it out 15 feet.
Would you let us see those up close? Pass them up here, please.
I would be happy to. I thought that they were presented. And again, that's a temporary structure there because of a saw or something that's out there just to protect the equipment. It's got nothing to do and is not going to be there.
Okay, we'll hear from, we have someone here in protest. It's okay, we'll hear from Mr. Dell right now.
Thank you.
My name is Ann Dell. I live next door to 524. I live at 528 Northwest 17th. We've lived there for over 38 years, and we have known all the owners since then. The rejection of the CA had nothing to do with was more than just the windows. It was because the two-story addition was never approved, and the pictures that they showed show that it has this massive presence that you can see from Dewey. That's across. We live on the corner at 528, and this house is the second in. It's a huge addition onto the back that was never approved. The previous owner still lives there and continues to make unapproved changes to the property almost every week, and continues to allow it to deteriorate at the same time. This addition has been up for at least 5 years and is in a deteriorated condition. That insulation board has holes in it and is not in good shape. Brick continues to be taken off of the house and not put back up. And assuming that these new people, the Bowmans, do own the house, the need for a CA still applies to them as well as to the previous owner. You can't just go into a property that's been partially torn up and then claim that that you don't have to get a CA for that. The temporary buildings that are there have been there for at least the last 5 years. And the backyard is in really bad shape itself. So I ask you to please not grant this appeal, that this property is in desperate need of cleaning up. I think the city is trying to help get the whole thing into compliance. I don't know what it will take. Most of the drawings do not really match what is actually there. I think if you went and looked at it, you would see that. And so please do not, I ask you to not grant this appeal. Thank you.
I've got a question, Ms. Dell.
Yes.
So you've lived there for
38 and a half
38 years. So when this came up before, an application was made before for an addition on the house in 1998?
Yes.
Yes. And were you in, did you know the
Yes, we knew
facts and everything surrounding that particular application at the time?
We knew that he wanted to put up a one-story addition and that with a deck on the back, and that we felt that the city probably would not object, since with the historic preservation, they don't care quite so much at the back. And but then all of a sudden, this two-story thing ballooned up there, and it's been there.
So at the time that they were to put a one-story addition with a deck,
we didn't object.
You didn't object to that
No.
particular deal?
No.
Okay.
And that did receive a CA at that time,
got a
correct?
CA, yes. But then it was several years before the work actually started on it.
And then eventually a two-story
A two-story thing
deal
went up, yes.
came up. Okay. Are there any questions of the applicant? Ms. Comey? Oh, do you want to speak?
If I can, just...
Yeah, oh yeah, sure, absolutely.
I'm Brian Dell, and I'm her husband.
Figured you were with her.
And the reason that I wanted to say something is that back whenever that original one-story addition was added and no one objected to it, was because you frankly couldn't see it from the street. I mean, we do live on the corner, and this is the second house in, and you couldn't see it at all. But all of a sudden, and you have pictures actually of this two-story addition, the thing is huge. You take the picture, and there are pictures in there from taken on the other side of Dewey, and you see this massive thing sticking back out there that is plainly visible and plainly contrary to the historical preservation of the area. Now, one other thing I heard, and I don't, with all due deference to Ms. Comey, I don't want to point out anything other than the fact that I have copies of those pictures and those drawings that she was showing. And if you look at the drawings and you look at the pictures, and I took the pictures, I took pictures of that because suddenly windows appeared on the back of that thing, and they're not like they were in the drawing, nor are they like the ones that were on the house before they built the two-story addition. We didn't have any objection with it back in those days because the lady that lived there was born in the house behind that one and lived there until she died. And this is, Doug Friesen is like the third owner of that house. Well, he'd be the third, and he still lives there, but somebody else owns it now, but has never been there. So in any event, there, that picture you just saw, that's the one that shows the view from the other side of Dewey, the west side of Dewey, across our backyard. We didn't have any objection when you couldn't see the thing, and I don't think the Historical Preservation Commission did either, nor did the rest of the members of Mester Park in that area. So that's what our objection is. The Historical Preservation Commission has disapproved it, along with about 4 other applications that have been made with regard to that property, and we'd ask that the Board of Adjustment affirm the denial of the application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Yeah.
At the March 3rd hearing, Mr. and Mrs. Dell were there as well. Mrs. Dell spoke to the commission, and she stated, and again, I have the transcript, which I believe has been presented to you. She said, "I don't mind the two-story addition at the back of this house." She made that statement on March the 3rd of this year. Her husband, Mr. Dell, appeared and made no comment at all with regards to the addition at the back of that house. His comments were questioning the title owners and questioning the previous owner and the litigation involved with him. Again, I cannot do anything about that. My clients can't do anything about that. Mrs. Dell today came before and said that there was no request for a certificate of appropriateness. Okay, I know that. When my clients got title, which was finally at the latter part of last year, we filed an application for the certificate of appropriateness. We can't go back in time and take title 5 years ago from 2005 when this structure was begun. We can't do that. We can only look to the future. We've got title to this property. We took this property. We filed our certificate of appropriateness. We are where we are. She says that this place is in desperate need of cleanup. She said that today. Yeah, she's right. It is in desperate need, and it's being done as quickly as we can. But as far as this structure is concerned, as far as what we are here for today, and again, the issue of how many requests have been made since my client took title, that's not before you today. The only thing before you is this addition. She said that he said that it is a structure that can now be seen. He never made that statement. None of those statements were made from the Dells at the time of this first hearing. And in fact, the staff report says specifically that they would not have a substantial adverse effect on the aesthetic, historical, or architectural significance. Before this hearing, Catherine, please forgive me, Catherine, because I do know your last name. Catherine and Paul came to this home. I was there with them. We looked at the structure. We looked at this addition. They were on the inside of this house. They were there and saw from the inside of the house that the windows, just as were drawn on this diagram, were there. They were covered up by the insulation that was on the outside that had not been cut for those windows because the previous owner had said, they said stop and nothing had been done. We did not create any new windows since March the 3rd. They were always there. The only thing that now shows in that is that the insulation was cut and they are now visible. But Catherine was in this home. She is here now. Those windows were always there. There is no difference between what my clients want and the drawings that are before this court.
So is it your contention that you would have been approved if the windows would have been showing?
I believe that's true because I have...
Based on what? How's that?
Well, if you look at the transcript that I presented to you, go to page... Tell you what, it's easier if I do it this way. Because I have a transcript outside of that. Okay. All right, if you start at page 18 of that transcript, Paul, who's the other individual, was with the staff. When questioned about the roof, he made the statement, it is my understanding, ... that the roof is not complete. That's on line 18 of page 18. On page 21, the unknown committee member, because we did not know who it was, at line 12 says, well, that makes it a 3-story, really. There's no 3-story structure to this. There's not even the mention of a 3-story structure. Go on to page 22. Under the name Allen, at line 10, there are still some things that are different from the drawing. The drawing shows windows across the back, and it's a blank wall, the upper level. They're looking at the photograph before the insulation was cut. There were windows there then, and there are windows there today, but they were covered. The previous owner had given instructions to cease, was given instructions to cease all work. That's why the insulation was still covering them, but they were there. The new picture shows the windows that were apparent from the inside, just not the out. We just cut the insulation for purposes of the picture that I presented for you today. We have put temporary wood frames around it. Let's go on to page 24. Again, the person's name is listed as Allen on line 3. It says there's too many inconsistencies and there's not enough information on the drawings, and the drawings don't match what's there. Again, there are no inconsistencies between the drawing and what's there. They just didn't have the windows being shown. Go on to page 25, Mr. Thomas on line 13. The drawings are certainly better than but that's not what's there. Mr. Thomas was in error. That is exactly what was there. Still at page 25, from the gentleman they listed as Allen on line 17. What I see is that there's windows missing and other things. The other things were never described, but the only other thing is that the roof, which was stated at the beginning of this hearing, the roof had not been completed. It was still a temporary fix. That's the only other thing, besides, of course, the shingles, the brick, and everything else. But there were no inconsistencies. If there were, Catherine or Paul would have described that in the staff report. On page 26, line 12, this is towards the center. It says, then we probably need to get a formal statement from the applicant representative that says that the drawings that have been provided are in fact not what's proposed. Wrong! It's exactly what was proposed. There's no difference between the two. And the last one at page 38 from a person they list as Reyna, R-E-Y-N-A, I don't think it's correct, line 7, says, I don't know what they're proposing. It's very unclear, but I think it would help the court system to just deny it and present it to the judge. They may have been unclear, but the drawings, the design, what was there, what the staff recommended, everything was in order. The materials were appropriate. Everything was appropriate. The position of it, and again, I've known Bryndale for many years. They never made any objection on March the 3rd that this structure was, I don't remember his words today, anywhere out of line. In fact, Ms. Dell said specifically, page 14, line 14, these are her exact words, I don't have a problem with anyone remodeling their house, and I don't mind the two-story addition at the back of this house. But what I do mind is for the last 5 years, this is an unfinished addition. I agree. We are asking this court to overturn what the Historic Preservation Board did and grant us the certificate of appropriateness so we can finish this structure. Are there any other questions?
I watched the video, and you're implying that the only issue that they had in denying this was the windows and whether, they knew about them or not. And that is not my impression. It's my impression that they had other issues above and beyond the windows.
Can you tell me, please, what those are?
Well, Mr. Thomas referred to it as a big box. I don't think he sees it as architecturally compatible with the original part of the house. The roof line changes substantially.
The roof line, if you will look at the west elevation that I just showed to you, west elevation. He is correct, and that is exactly what is shown. The roof line, the angle of the roof line, once it's completed, will be slightly different. The original roof line, I wish you could see where my red is. That's the original roof, right there. The addition is right here. When the roof is completed, Mr. Austin, it will have a slight variance, and it will extend further back. Absolutely. But Mr. Thomas was saying that those windows were not there, and the picture that was before them, again, it looked like a monster. But
I'm simply saying that I think it's more than the windows. It's probably, cause for the HP denial.
Again, I have reviewed the transcript. If you can say, if you can show me where it was more than just that, because I read through it myself. They said specifically the windows, and the roof line was mentioned as well. The roof, they thought, and maybe they did not listen to what Paul had said, there's no doubt it's going to extend further the 15 feet, no doubt. But, and the angle is slightly different. But from the back looking at it, there is simply very little. Here is what it looked like. This is the original wall. You have the color photos with you. That's what it looked like originally. It was a straight, flat with the windows at the top. And here it is, my black and white view of which you have the color. Window, door with the windows on top. It simply moved back 15 feet 8 inches. You're right, the roof line is going to extend.
I think we might like to get a little testimony from the HP.
Sure.
Put it here, if you want to take a few minutes for that, please. Might help clarify some issues.
Catherine Montgomery, Historic Preservation Architect and Officer for the Historic Preservation Commission. How can I answer your questions or comments?
I have a question, actually. So, Catherine, did you produce the staff report that was?
The staff report was actually written by Paul Reichbost, whom I supervise, and I reviewed it.
Okay, and the recommendation to approve the construction of the addition was based off of the drawings presented of the 3 elevations, is that correct?
That's correct.
So it's your opinion that, staff's opinion that the drawings as shown do meet all the criteria necessary for CA?
The drawings, as shown, we felt were compatible with the neighborhood and were approvable.
Okay. One other question, if a CA is granted, I guess if we approve this and a CA is granted, how long will they have to complete the addition?
A certificate of appropriateness is good for 1 year on this type of work.
And what happens if they don't finish that in 1 year?
They have an opportunity to come in before the certificate expires and have a new certificate issued. That would require a new application for extension of their original CA.
Can we modify the timelines here, or not?
The ordinance allows you to affirm, deny, or
Modify.
So you could do that.
Okay. Just wanted to bring that up as a possibility.
I don't know what can be done to bring this house into compliance, but almost every week, more non-compliant work continues to be done. 2 weeks ago, a new side door was put in that does not match the old door. New windows continue to be put in the house. It's not only the back windows on that addition that the HP Commission had a problem with, it's other windows that have been replaced without a CA as well. And every time something new is done, more brick comes off and more dilapidation occurs, and it's never fixed. My main issue, although I don't like that 2-story thing actually, my main issue is the dilapidation and deterioration of the house. There have been some new windows put up that have been allowed to deteriorate. That tin roof has been on there for about 5 years. There's no real excuse for that. And I don't know what the Bowmans intend to do with this house. I don't know if they have ever seen the house. But Mr. Friesen continues to live there, and his workman still comes and works on that house. So, you know, I don't know what the city can do.
Did he call the Action Center? Complained about it?
Yes.
This?
The Action Center knows about all this.
Yeah, and they don't come out, they don't send
And if
people out to
they,
stop work?
you know,
I realize they have a lot of workload around the city. But,
the work has continued.
yeah. Okay.
And so, you know, I don't know. I wish that the house could somehow get into compliance. I would like it to be finished off and somehow become acceptable with the HP guidelines, and something that we could look at from my kitchen and not look at tar paper and removed brick and windows that are deteriorating.
Okay. Thank you.
Jeff, I do think there was some confusion on the video, particularly about the roof, and they were dealing with a lot of other issues as well that are not before us at this time. So I think they were just concerned that it wasn't looking like the drawings. They weren't even sure what was being proposed. I mean, you know, if it's being proposed that these drawings were acceptable to HP staff and they felt that it's appropriate, I think that's what's before us, and then they have to build the building like the drawings that are approved, and if not, then consequences occur, whatever those may be.
I think that summary is correct. There are lots of issues surrounding this property, and of course today the one item that's up for to appeal the decision is the construction of the addition. So I presume that a discussion of the others issues probably isn't really appropriate at this time.
Do you concur then that the window issue was the criteria?
I think the window issue and the roof line issue were the main problems they had with not understanding, or just there were several drawing sets, and the pictures they had didn't look like that. And like I said, I think they were dealing with so many other things. I mean, it still looks possible to my eye that, you know, based on the drawings presented, that the structure could be completed like that. The roof line is not finished. I recognize that, and you can see where it would slope as shown in the drawing. So,
Ms. Cohen, you've been silent on this issue of whether or not there's ongoing work going on there, if former owners living there, what that situation. I mean, you've made some comment about who actually has deed to the property or who actually has good title to the property and that type of thing. But if you're looking for cooperation, then I mean, do you take issue with the assertion that there's work going on here that's, you know?
I believe that what they're talking about since that denial or since that last hearing that we were at, there has been a door on the west elevation that was replaced. It was because of a structural problem that occurred, and there is a distinction between what the owners believed was appropriate in order to secure the sound structure and what the thing is. Again, we're not dealing with that. The window issue they've had for some time, that's been, and I believe Catherine saw all of the changes in the windows, and that issue is still pending either before, I believe, going to be before this one. But just like I said, the only issue right now is that back addition. That's it. You guys can, you know, haul me off and tar and feather me later on about whatever was done inappropriately since then, but that's not for today. I'll be back one of these days for you guys to beat me up all you want. But as far as this structure is concerned, that's the only reason why we're here.
If you're making assertions about intent and that type of thing, we have to rely on that type of thing when we're considering a case. And
understood.
If you're making assertions that we want to do things the right way, we want to get it done timely,
which is correct.
That type of thing is that it's counterproductive to think that there might be something going on that.
Since that hearing, I will not deny there are plenty of things being done to the inside of that house. I will not deny that. But as far as the outside, any structural changes, the only thing that I am aware of, there was a change on the west elevation to that door. The owners believed that they had to secure the property by because there was some problem with the structure there. But we'll deal with that, and we're going to get it. It's going to pass. I promise you, my clients have every intention of getting this done according to the ordinances, the rules before this board.
Okay. Was the rear structure ever permitted?
The rear structure as a one-story in 1998 only. In 2005, when the second story was added, it was not given any, there was no record of any
building permit
filing of anything, nothing at all.
So if a CA was granted, a building permit would have to be applied for, and proper inspections would be...
That's correct. And in fact, if a building permit had been applied for, then, as is standard practice, the Development Center staff come up to my office, and I sign and seal attesting that the documents that have been submitted to them are indeed a match to what the Historic Preservation Commission approves.
Okay.
Rod, you alluded to a shorter time frame being allowed on this edition based on the fact that possibly it...
Oh, we can. I mean, that's all I'm saying is that these folks have been put through a lot for over the years, and if the intent is to move it along and get it secured properly and completed properly, if there is a shorter time frame, I think we ought to ask for that.
And given that it's already partially built, there's some time
yeah,
there that's,
I mean, a lot of really nice homes get built in a whole year, so I mean...
I'd be open to making a motion to reverse the decision of the HP Commission and allow the addition based on the drawings. Go ahead, Rita.
It sounds like what you're considering is granting a CA for shorter than a one-year period.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, I misunderstood.
Okay.
The ordinance does allow the full one-year period, and so if you chose to approve a certificate of appropriateness, they would have the one-year period. You could put conditions on that certificate. You could modify it in that manner, but they would have the entire year. You could perhaps build in some kind of reporting requirements, progress reporting requirements, so that they have to get certain things done by a particular time. But the ordinance does allow the one-year period when you receive a certificate of appropriateness.
So someone from the city would establish that it was substantially complete within the year period.
We would have inspectors who would be able to do that.
Yeah.
Kathy, would you like to speak to that?
That's probably the building department.
I think what I heard suggested was that the certificate of appropriateness period is 1 year, and that if this board decides that they want to have some sort of accountability checks or milestones met inside of that 1 year period of time, that's what the board could vote to do. And with the cooperation of the staff, compliance staff, and our HP staff, I think that we could make those observations if that's what the board desires.
Okay.
I'll be here quarterly.
What can you get done in 6 months?
You're really asking the wrong person at this time. But I will tell you, I will be here quarterly if you wish to give reports on what has or has not been done as relates to this addition. I'll be here monthly. I will do whatever you'd like to have done to show what we have done to complete this structure.
What kind of a timeline can we put on this, other than the certificate? Can we put a timeline of less than a year, or does it have to be?
The certificate is for the complete year. And
Okay.
You can't shorten that, but you could impose certain reporting requirements. Ms. Comey has indicated she'd be willing to come back and give you progress reports for whatever period.
Or if we said the roof had to be completed within 6 months.
Well, it
or
seems
something of that nature.
Protesters, there's a couple of items that would really, I think, satisfy them. Number one, if the project was cleaned up and stayed cleaned up, okay?
Yes.
Number two, that there be nothing in addition to the plans done from this day forward. And, with that, along with your motion, I'll second your motion.
Oh, excuse, ma'am. No, we have to speak into the microphone because it's recorded hearings.
Part of the CA that they wanted had to do with some brick and some other items that were not approvable. I wonder, is that included? Are you approving the use of replacing all the brick on the house? Because that was part of the CA.
No.
There was an application made for several items, as you can see from the staff report. Item number 1 was to construct an addition. Item number 2 was to replace windows. That's in relationship to the original structure. Item number 3 was to reconstruct the front porch. Item number 4 was to replace brick. Item number 5 to replace siding. And item number 6, replace front door and side lights. The Historic Preservation Commission took each one of these items up. They have the option to take them up each separately. In this particular case, as a result of the hearing the day that the denial of the construction of the addition was made, the remaining items were again placed on continuance, and a decision has been made on those items subsequent to the decision on the addition. I understand the appeal today is just on the addition and not the other items, so they would not be a part of the decision that this body would be making today.
And the other items are in various stages of completion.
If you really want me to speak on those items, I can.
Well, we're not.
But they're really, the replaced brick item was withdrawn by the applicant, and I think it was the replaced siding item that was withdrawn by the applicant. The front door and side lights, the replaced windows, and reconstruct front porch were all denied at the June meeting of the HP Commission. Might have been the May meeting. So they were subsequently denied if they weren't withdrawn.
Yep.
The property is continuing to receive Action Center complaints. The compliance officer has been out there. The case is much more complicated, and at this point, the construction of the addition is the paramount issue that's been appealed.
One more.
I understand the problems, and I think if you look at the pictures, you'll see that there's something that is not quite right with regard to the so-called windows that were suddenly appeared at the back of that house versus what had been either in the drawings or in the original house. One of the things that seems to be a concern of this board appears to be the fact that it's gone on for 12 years, and yet the outside hasn't even begun to be completed. It continues in this apparent state of disrepair. And it's somewhat disturbing, at least to those of us that live nearby, that there should be a concern that they need 6 more months. And if they haven't completed it in 12 years, they're not going to do it in 6 more months. If they're going to do it at all, let them start from the beginning with an application to the Historical Preservation Commission for a certificate of appropriateness and get it done within that year. We put up with it for an awful long time, and we're really kind of tired of it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, that is in essence what they've done with the addition. The rest of the house isn't before us, but they have made an application for the addition to come into compliance, get a CA, and complete it within a year if we so. The rest.
Sir, we have to speak into the microphone, sir.
I thought after that fellow from Croton or McAfee Taft's kept bumping into it and making all that noise, I thought I'd just try it from a distance. Anyway, I looked through that transcript, and I heard this assertion that my wife said she didn't care anything about it. I couldn't, A, find that she said anything in that transcript, nor, B, that anybody ever said that they approved the second story. So there's a lot of things that are going on here that didn't seem to come up, because we were here the last time when this board denied this application that comes back on the appeal because they claim they didn't get notice. And we've been coming here regularly, and we've been making our assertions, And if anybody ever said anything like that, I don't think it was her, because I don't think she's ever said for a minute that she thought that that second story was appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I think we're ready for a motion. We're going to try to do a motion on this.
Well, do we? Okay. So we have a motion in a second, but are there any conditions? I'm not quite sure how to put any reporting condition onto her.
You made a motion.
What did you move?
I said I was open to making a motion.
No, he didn't make a motion.
I thought he did.
No, I'm sorry, yeah.
We're looking for...
I will make a motion, but I'm trying to figure out how to put any conditions upon the reporting period, because I'm very sympathetic to the neighborhood and the neighbors of having to stare at this for many years, and it would be nice to see it get done and done properly. All we can control today is the addition.
Well,
I don't know. Like I said, I'm not really sure how to put any reporting conditions onto them, whether they are dried in or have the roof completed in 6 months. I'm not really sure what's fair to them. I want to see it done in a year. Max.
well, but, I mean, you can substantially complete the exterior of this within 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a year, and of course they have a year for substantial completion of the whole thing, but in terms of the exterior character of it, you can do that in 6 months.
Yeah, definitely.
David, another suggestion would be to just have her come back quarterly and report on the progress that's been made.
Okay. Would that be fast for the HP Commission?
But there's no requirement in that.
Yeah.
I mean, if they do 2% one quarter and 2% another quarter, that type of thing, there's no requirement.
Yeah, because they have that full year.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I mean, if there's not, if we can't say that there's 50% completion within 6 months or whatever it is, we can't clarify something like that, then there's no teeth in it at all. I think we want to move it along. I can't make a motion.
Who's gauging 50%? I think it has to be more tangible of being the exterior completed.
One other thing I wanted to say is that if a certificate of appropriateness would be granted, and it's good for a year, and the property and the addition isn't completed, then the way the ordinance is written is that the applicant would be required to come back to the Historic Preservation Commission for an extension, or with a new application for a new period of time.
Yeah.
And so I don't know I'm just thinking about further down the road, what if things don't happen, and what would be those consequences?
So are we going to ask for a new certificate? Is that what the motion's going to be?
The motion would be to allow for the CA for this proposed addition. The only thing I'm trying to figure out is if we can make some conditions on that to try to move it along quickly, and what those could be and how they would be upheld.
Well, that's what we were talking about, but you either grant the certificate of appropriateness or you don't, and any conditions you impose would be voluntarily complied with by the applicant.
And if they're not, there's really no consequences. Right, there's really no consequences if they don't. Now, keeping the heat on them and making them report quarterly to HP, maybe.
You could make that request as part of it, but you'd lose your jurisdiction once you grant the certificate of appropriateness. You couldn't then take it back.
Yeah.
So.
I'm having some difficulty hearing you, but if you're asking it's a little, I'm very, that's all right. If you grant the certificate of appropriateness, are you asking if I will agree or say I will be here monthly or quarterly, whatever this board requires? The answer is yes.
And I understand that. The concern the board seems to be having is on mandatory accountability. We understand that you're giving your word to do it, but as far as the board's authority to require
it, I understand. Okay.
We're not finding that.
I see.
But she can volunteer to do that and
have.
Okay, you volunteer to do that. Okay.
And it's a part of the record,
Reporting to us or to HP?
whichever you choose.
Okay.
You can impose, and she has agreed to accept certain conditions.
That's correct.
So if you have some you'd like to impose, she is speaking on behalf of
Okay.
her client, that she will accept those and operate under those conditions.
Okay.
What I would suggest is that the roof be completed and the exterior facade of the addition be completed within 6 months.
Well, I know I can get the roof in there. I believe I can do the 6 months, but
I know you can.
I would rather,
It can definitely be done in as far as a
I really think I can make
feasibility
it, but I,
Build whole office buildings in 6 months.
well, you know,
Please.
I'm not personally the one that's going to be putting those bricks on,
I
but
know.
I believe it
But
can be.
you're standing here in their stead.
I understand that. I know I can make it in a year, and I know the roof can be done probably in 3 months. I believe I can make it in 6. But again, I will be here every month, every quarter, whatever you want, to let you know how far we've gotten.
Summertime, the weather's getting better.
It is much better. That's why I think I can get it done.
Okay, how about it, let me take a stab at this. We can get it out. So I make a motion to approve, or actually, reversing the decision of the HP Commission to approve the CA.
Yes.
Correct. Contingent upon the roof and the exterior cladding and windows being complete within 6 months?
No, the exterior, the veneer of the building.
Yeah, the exterior cladding, right?
It's just.
Yeah.
As I said, that's the windows.
Yeah.
It's all that's on the agenda, is just to construct an addition to the rear of the house.
Okay?
So it's got to be limited to just what's on here.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's my suggestion was is the principal areas, the largest areas are the veneer of the building and the roof.
Are completed within 6 months with quarterly progress reports. I would recommend it to HP Commission. They're better equipped to deal with that. And they'll be probably dealing with other issues as well.
And when you say quarterly reports, are these in-person reports?
Sure,
Or
yeah,
written
yeah,
reports?
in person, progress reports, in person, yeah, photographic documentation of the progress being made. This is specific to the addition.
Okay, you want photographic documentation, the roof, and I could not hear you, Mr. Baker.
The veneer, the exterior veneer of the addition be completed?
Within 6 months.
You already have windows, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I will second that with one stipulation, and I will check that the exterior be cleaned up and kept cleaned up, and I will drive by and see if it's done. Will you volunteer that that will be done?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
I know that that's been in the process for some
I accept
time.
that addition to my motion. I'll drive by too, it's on my way to work.
And that there's no additional unauthorized construction on the house.
Well,
Yeah,
we can do that. We can do that.
No.
We can do that.
No?
Okay. We got all that down. We have a motion and a second to reverse the decision of the, reverse the decision of the HP Commission. Motion as conditioned. Approve the appeal with conditions.
Ms. Talley, are you writing down all of these conditions so I have something? Thank you.
Yeah, good. Okay, please record your vote. All right, that's it.
I've never seen green lights before. Thank you very much.
Item number 10, case number 13253, appeal of Park Plaza District Redevelopment Corporation of the decision of the Downtown Design Review Committee regarding the approval of a conceptual plan to construct and install streetscape elements along Southwest 2nd Street to Northwest 6th Street and Lee Avenue to E.K. Gaylord Avenue.
Mr. Dahl, are you going to come on up and give us your name and address?
My name is Rick Dowell. Our business is located at 501 North Walker Avenue, Oklahoma City.
Okay, thank you.
And I think I've got some good news for you. I know you guys have had a very long day. I think the applicant and our outfit, I think we've come to an agreement.
We're good?
Yes, I think. Well, let me just show you. I'm going to give you a handout, which hopefully will make this pretty quick.
Mr. Dow, I'm going to ask you, actually, could you pull that a little closer to you this time?
Yes.
The microphone, just a little bit.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, could you just pull a little closer to you? I'm sorry.
Are you all right now?
There we go. Thank you.
I'm not making popping noises like that a lawyer was.
No popping.
Okay, if I could just hand this out to you real quick, it'll just make it a lot faster.
Yeah, go ahead. Just give them all to you, and I'll pass them down. All righty? Thanks.
Okay, well, what I'm here to talk to you about today is the Project 180. There may be a little confusion. We're only discussing the Project 180 as it applies to the Park Plaza District, which was a newly formed district in downtown Oklahoma City. I've never used this thing before, so I hope I don't make a hash of it.
Very good.
Okay, there we go. There are, let's see, I guess by last count, about 7 districts in Oklahoma City. The Project 180 excludes, at least that's my understanding, excludes the Bricktown District, the Deep Deuce District, and the Automobile Alley District, which you can see on page 6. So really all that we're here about is to discuss the implications of Project 180 to the Park Plaza District, which was the newly formed district. And what caused a little conflagration here, and I hope not too much waste of time on the part of city staff and our people, is the fact that this district was in the process of being formed while the Project 180 thing was going along. And so sometimes some voices maybe didn't get heard that should have, just due to the confusion of two things happening at the same time. Now, the bad things, I need my reading glasses to see what I'm looking at here. Okay, there's really 2 issues involved here. First of all is what the 180 plan is going to do with respect to streetscapes and what it's going to look like. And then, of course, there's a second issue here, and that is how it gets paid for. The project itself is paid for out of the TIF money, so the individual property owner won't have to pay for it. However, in the case of maintenance, property owners will be required to pay up to $5 a linear foot, as my understanding is, toward the upkeep of the Project 180 capital improvements after they're complete, or at least within, I think, 3 years after they're complete. So what's happened is, since there's a potential that in the Park Plaza District there can be a change to the way things look, that's obviously gotten the attention of property owners in the area. And then furthermore, the fact that they'll have to pay to maintain it has gotten their curiosity further aroused. So the first thing to look at is the nature of the district, because obviously when you form a district, your idea is that you want to have some kind of message that that district has. In other words, it has some kind of ambiance to it, some kind of thing that coordinates the various buildings in that district into some kind of whole that makes people want to have a business there or to live there. Now, if you look at page, we'll get there in a minute. No, I'm going backwards here. I knew I was no good at clicking. Okay, go to page 4 and page 3. And what you'll see on page 3 and 4 is a picture of what some of the historical buildings look like in the area. So the idea of those of us that wanted to form the Park Plaza District is that the motif we wanted to promote was the historic buildings. For example, St. Joseph Church is over 100 years old. A lot of the churches are very old. Some of the buildings are fairly old, and it was that aspect of the area that we wanted to preserve. So we come to problems that we have in the area. There's really two problems as I see it. One is that the proposal, or at least what I think the exact word for it is the need two pairs of glasses here. It's the conceptual approval for Project 180. And what the conceptual approval does is give parameters as to what light fixtures can look like, what the sidewalks are going to look like, in general, how things are going to be done. Now, it doesn't tell you exactly how they're going to do it, but it gives you the parameters in which future building permits are going to have to operate. So what gave us a little bit of a shock, and I don't know that this was intended. Okay, here we go. For example, go to page 13. Now, if you look at page 13, you'll see a light pole there. Now, that's what was put in by a previous bond issue. If you look at the pole next to it, now I'm not sure whether the city would propose making it that color or not. There's been some comment it may end up being black, but you can see that's quite a change in appearance. And most of our property owners, in fact, everyone that I've talked to, and you've had a lot of letters to that effect, take issue with how fitting it is to have a pole like the one you see on the left as opposed to the one that we've already got. A second issue is with respect to the benches that you see there. And then you also see the bicycle rack, which is kind of that hoopy-looking thing on the side. So our idea was that, well, if the city, through this Project 180, is going to add things, we'd like them to at least consider having poles that are more traditional-looking. If they're going to have a bench that it look a little more, blend a little better in with the buildings that we have in the area, and the same thing with bicycle racks. And then the third thing is that property owners be given the option in the case of the location of these bicycle racks or the benches as to whether they're allowed to be put there. In other words, it would require the permission of the property owner if those things were going to be placed there. The second issue that comes up, and this also is in the conceptual design. Oh, good grief, I think I just turned it off. How do I get this thing back on again? There you go. Is the parking lot issue. And I don't know if all of you were on the board here when I brought this up. Gosh, it's been a couple of years ago. If you look at, let me move forward here. Okay. You see page 8 and page 9. This is a problem we have that's kind of unique to this district. We have a lot of vacant parking lots. Or not vacant, I mean they're used as parking lots, but I mean they're quite ugly. There's no landscaping whatsoever around them. You see the cars from the street. And we as a group of citizens in that area would like to make it look better. So one proposal that we had, and you've seen that before, go to page 7, where you look at the bottom. I look at the middle one, design variance allowed by the Board of Appeals. That was this board allowed us that variance, I think it was a couple of years ago, which was somewhat at odds with what the city proposed, which is if what you look at is at the top. Now, at the top, you see a parking lot with a bunch of cars in it. If things are done the way that it's recommended by the Project 180 conceptual approval, all that would be allowed would be something that you see at the top. If what is allowed is what we're recommending, at least in our area, something what you see at the bottom would be allowed. And that allows the screening of parking lots. Now, these are fairly minor things, I think, and it would certainly go a long way to gaining the support of what at the moment seems to be rather recalcitrant property owners in the area. So, without any further ado, because I know you guys have had a very long day here, I'm not sure how best to present this. I've already discussed this with the city staff. Actually, since this meeting was so long, it gave us some time to kind of get together.
What did you work out?
Yes, we worked up something for you here, if I can bring it to you.
Absolutely.
By the way, let me just be sure they don't think I'm pulling a fast one on. Let me just let her look at it before you. Okay. Basically, what you have there is not a requirement that the city abide by these three things, and basically the three things is one, that we be allowed to encroach on city easements if it's appropriate for the purpose of covering up parking lots in the way that I list there on page 7. A second thing is that at least the city, when they take out a building permit, consider the possibility of using street lights that are a little more in line with what we currently have, that's more goes better with historic buildings. And then the third thing is with respect to the tenants having the landlords having some say as to whether you place benches and bicycle racks in front of their premises. And this does not, as I understand it, mandate the city in taking out a permit to follow that, but it merely says that, hey, they're not prevented from using that criterion, because of the way the thing currently sits, they couldn't do this without changing the conceptual framework, which was approved by the Downtown Review Committee. But if you accept this amendment and the city's happy with that, they can begin construction and we're done, and I think everybody's relatively happy.
Okay. Does anybody else want to speak? Oh, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name's Laura Story. I'm with the Public Works Department, and I also represent the Project 180. And as Mr. Dow had indicated, we are working together with him to try to resolve this before we got here. We have a letter from the city manager's office through Kathy O'Connor that states our intent that we'd like to add to the record. And also, just for the record, I just want to read what we've written down, and I believe is a meeting of the minds with Mr. Dow. As the applicant, the city, for Project 180 conceptual design approval, we understand that the Park Plaza District's desire to reinforce their district's identity. Due to this fact, we would support an amendment to the conceptual request to include the wording that you have in front of you. Okay? We, in essence, what it means is that we would move forward with the conceptual approval as it stands, with the exception of the limits where Project 180 hit this area. And then we negotiate and work with the property owners to make sure that there's a meeting of the minds between the steering committee decisions and the needs of this district, and come to a conclusion on that and move forward with a review of the conceptual approval at that point for this particular area.
Okay.
And we just would like to get that amended to the conceptual design.
All right.
Can I give you this for the record?
Sure.
And so, Laura, this is
the
basically...
same thing.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Laura, this is basically, we have a map here showing the overlap.
Yes,
You're
sir.
quite familiar with that map?
No, I'm not, but, I mean, I have it. I just haven't studied it. I'm sorry.
But that's essentially, it would just be that overlap that you're talking about, correct?
Where's the red clicker thing?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's that right there.
I can point with that. So the area that would be accepted from this, so I don't blind anybody, The area that would be accepted from this is...
Outside of the red line?
Yeah, the red line is Project 180.
Mm-hmm.
And the area in between Hudson and Walker, this area is what's in question. Between 6th, am I up at 6th? 6th, 7th, 6th, and 4th. Yes, thank you. In this area right in here is where we need to work with Mr. Dow and the rest of the property owners in the area to come to a better consensus with what they're wanting.
So east of Hudson would most likely still stay as planned, then around the memorial and...
Yes, it would be consistent with that. We have other areas in this project that we are already considering exceptions to the conceptual design, such as front of OG&E with the gas lamps along Harvey and the very urban area there. Those gas lamps are not being taken out because that's part of the fabric of what we're, improving. That looks nice. We're going to keep some of that flavor there. So this would just be another example of how we handle differences within the conceptual approval of Project 180.
So how do we frame this then? Are we going to?
Well, it depends on what Mr. Dow intends.
Do you want to withdraw your appeal based on the agreement with the city, or how do you want to do that?
Well, the way I see doing it is if you put that wording in there, you basically our appeal, if that's added, if you guys can add that to the conceptual design, just that wording, and it'll just be added to the conceptual design, then we're happy. We know what's in there. So whenever there's a permit taken out and we have to go to the Downtown Review Committee, if there's some discrepancy here, we can't be told, hey, guys, it's not in the plan here. We can't even look at what you're doing. This way, it's in there
Some modification
as this affects the Park Plaza District.
with this language.
It doesn't constrain the city to do it. It just means that they're not barred from doing it.
Okay.
So
you can modify the decision of the Downtown Design Review Committee to include the presented language.
Yes, ma'am. We just want to add it too. That gives us further clarification to look at the conceptual design in this area. And it gives us the permission to move forward with considering these options that are very important to this district.
So a motion, if any of you chose to make it, would be the language Mr. Dow presented as well as what Ms. Story just said. And you all got that right?
So moved.
Well, they'll have to review the language and approve all of that. Okay. Make sure we got all that right.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have a motion to that effect?
I will make a motion to that effect.
Sure.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion to modify the decision of the Downtown Design Review Committee. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And record your votes. There you go. About this? Anybody want that? Yep.
It's not often that everybody gets to leave happy.
Thanks for your cooperation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Motion to, we got election. Okay. We're opening up the floor for, open up the floor for nominations for chairman and vice chairman for next year, for starting the next meeting.
Do that, and since you're missing a member, you could pass it if you wanted.
He doesn't want to be.
Oh, okay.
We know he doesn't want to be. So, can I nominate?
That's a motion. So.
I can't do that.
Nominate David Wanzer for chairman and Jim Allen for vice chairman.
Okay. All right. Any objections? Okay. Record your vote. Record your vote. That's the way it is.
You didn't have a second.
Huh? Oh.
You don't.
We'd have to do David and vote, and then Jim and vote.
Okay, good. Huh? I can't second. Can I?
Chairman.
I don't know. Let's do this anyway.
Let's do it separately.
Okay.
So that the Wanzer election An Allen second,
Okay.
and so we can vote on that.
So we have that, do you have a second on that? Here.
Second.
Okay, record your vote. Okay. Now we have a motion.
Nominate Jim Allen for vice chair.
Okay. Record your votes. Okay. There it is.
For the record, I'm out next week, or next meeting.
Okay.
Well, then he's chairman.
So,
Next time.
for the July 1st meeting, yeah. I'm gone.